Chapter 167. By Xiaoshuang, by Qiuxue. They were the two brightest pearls of the Thousand Island Lake, twins with seventh-rank bloodline. The old man of heaven prison liked the most. Luli immediately guessed the identity of the other girl. The reason why it was so easy to recognize her was because the other girl's temperament was very different. She was very gentle and delicate, and there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth, giving people the feeling that she was a quiet lily that had bloomed. On the other hand, Bai Xiaoshuang was much colder. The way she looked at him was like a 10,000-year-old glacier. Bai Xiaoshuang, on the other hand, was much more quick-witted. Compared to Bai Qiuxue, who was quiet and active, there was a huge difference. However, the two of them looked exactly the same. When a beauty reached a certain level, it was very rare to see one. For example, Lu Yi was very common. Su Fangfei was a level better than Lu Yi, but Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiuxue were even better than Su Fangfei. The looks and temperament of the two girls should be the best in the northern desert. They were at the same level as the young lady with a jade flute and a flower mark on her neck that Luli saw at the frigid cloud mountain. Beautiful women were hard to come by. Luli was at the age where he was full of vigor and vigor. Inevitably, he found it hard to control himself. Bai Xiaoshuang held her head high. She glanced at him and turned her head away. Madame Yin tasted the wine with a gentle smile. Bai Qiuxue, on the other hand, was looking at him curiously with a smile on the corner of her mouth, which made Luli feel very comfortable. In just 3 seconds, Luli had regained his composure. Everyone wanted to pursue a beautiful woman, but without the strength to do so, it would be impossible. What was more, based on Bai Xiaoshuang's impression of him, even if he were at the later stage of the Soul Pond realm, Bai Xiaoshuang wouldn't give him a second look. Luli's temperament was not bad. He smiled gently, cupped his fists, and said, "Madame Yin, Lady Qiuxue." Bai Xiaoshuang waited for a moment, but Luli didn't say he had seen Lady Xuan. She glared at him angrily. Luli put on a mocking smile and said, "Lady Xuan, we meet again." "Oomph." Bai Xiaoshuang snorted. The smile on Madame Yan's face widened. Bai Qiuxue also smiled gently, but didn't say anything. "Done." Finally, Madame Yin spoke. "Xuang, you have promised me. Do me a favor and don't argue with Luli." Bai Xiaoshuang turned her head away without saying anything. Madame Yin looked at Luli and said, "Luli, you are a man. Can't you be more broad-minded? Apologize to Xuang and let bygones be bygones. We're about to depart." Madame Yin showed a trace of pleading in her eyes. Luli's heart softened. He cupped his fist in front of his chest and said, "Lady Xuang, you are the pearl of the Thousand Island Lake. You must be gracious. Otherwise, what would happen if your countless suitors saw it? All right, this Lu will apologize to you." Madame Yin rolled her eyes. Bai Qiuxue burst into laughter. Who would apologize like this? Bai Xiaoshuang glared at Luli again. Madame Yin waved her hand and said, "Okay, let's go. Qiuxue, keep an eye on Xuang on the way. Don't let her do anything stupid." Bai Xiaoshuang stood up angrily and walked forward. Bai Qiuxue stood up and said with a smile, "Island owner Lu, Xuang is just stubborn and has a temper. She has a good heart. Please forgive her. Let's go now." Luli would show more respect when others showed respect. He cupped his fist in front of his chest and said, "Lady Qiuxue, you are too kind. I'm also at fault." Bai Qiuxue said nothing more. She walked forward with a smile. Luli and Chief Steward Bai followed her. Luli feasted his eyes on the perfect back and curves of the peerless beauty in front of him. Bai Qiuxue had an elegant temperament. Even when she walked, she looked very attractive. Bai Xiaoshuang was already waiting outside the teleportation formation at the plaza on the peak. There were 6 other young men waiting with her, all of them 18 or 19 years old. Luli sensed them and found that they were all at the Soul Pond realm. 3 of them had bloodline marks on their necks, all cyan, bloodline of the 5th rank. The Bai family really has a strong foundation. Luli exclaimed to himself. The old man of heaven prison had dominated the Thousand Island Lake for more than 2,000 years. Countless resources had built up the prosperous Bai family. The 6 young men were all wearing luxurious clothes. Their skin was fair and their temperament was extraordinary. When they saw Bai Qiushue, they all showed respect. But when they saw Lu Li, their expressions turned cold. So it seems that Bai Xiaoshuang has spoken ill of me. These young masters of the Bai family don't like me. Lu Li shook his head secretly. Bai Xiaoshuang and her sister were the 2 ladies with the highest status in the Bai family. These young masters must be following their lead. Lu Li had offended Bai Xiaoshuang. Naturally, these young masters would not be polite to him. Island owner Lu, these 6 are all young masters of the immediate Bai family. I will introduce them to you later. Bai Qiushue turned around and said to Lu Li in a low voice, which made Lu Li feel better about her. This girl's temperament and shrewdness were much better than Bai Xiaoshuang's. They went into the teleportation formation. After a white glare, they appeared at the open ground at the foot of the mountain. The eyes of the people on the open ground lit up. Greetings, Lady Shui, Lady Shuang, Young Mastering, Young Master 2, Young Master Rome. They saluted and greeted them one by one. But when they saw Lu Li, many were confused. They didn't know him. Was he a young master of the Bai family? Lu Li? Su Fangfei shouted in surprise. How come Lu Li was with the young masters and young ladies of the Bai family? Seeing that many people were staring at Lu Li, Bai Qiushue explained with a smile, Nice to meet you. This is island owner Lu. He will come with us to the tomb of Dragon King. A ring on Bai Xiaoshuang's hand glowed. A purple chariot appeared. She shouted, Time is of the essence. Let's go. We will teleport to the Black Tooth Island first, and then go directly to the Cliff of Purgatory. Bai Xiaoshuang got on the purple chariot. She looked at Bai Qiushue, who walked in reluctantly. The chariot flew away and disappeared to the south. Many people understood. The 6 disciples of the immediate Bai family got on a regular chariot, but it was a regular one. There were 2 horses pulling the chariot, and it galloped away. The other young masters and young ladies got on their own chariots and went into the city. Lu Li had no choice but to get on a chariot arranged by Chief Steward Bai and follow them into the city. Chief Steward Bai didn't go with them. Instead, he stood by the teleportation formation as if he was waiting for someone. After the time for 1 incense stick to burn, the teleportation formation lit up. Madame Yin walked out. Chief Steward Bai quickly led Madame Yin onto a luxurious chariot. The chariot also went into the city. As soon as the chariot entered the city, the plaza in the city lit up with rays of light. Chief Steward Bai lifted the curtain and said, Madam, they are going to the Black Tooth Island. Madame Yin sat on the bed with her eyes closed. She nodded slightly without saying anything. Chief Steward Bai thought about it and said with a frown, Madam, isn't our family being too reckless this time? The tomb of Dragon King is full of traps and inhibition formations. If anything happens to the 2 young ladies, what do you know? Madame Yin opened her eyes and said, If we don't let go, the fledglings will never spread their wings. The 3 royal families have sent out their most distinguished disciples. How can we, the Bai family, show weakness? What's more, with Lu Li here, nothing serious will happen. Chief Steward Bai thought he heard it wrong. He blinked his eyes and asked, Madam, are you sure? Lu Li is only at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. The Bai family sent out 8 warriors of the Soul Pond realm. 9 of the young disciples of the Thousand Island Lake were at the Soul Pond realm. Lu Li was only at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. He could only go with them as a follower. Now, Madame Yin said that with Lu Li here, nothing would happen? You don't understand. Madame Yin shook her head and said, The most important thing to go to the tomb of Dragon King is not the realm. Otherwise, why would warriors above the age of 20 be restricted? To be able to survive in that kind of dangerous place, first, it depends on wisdom, second, experience, third, courage, and fourth, luck. Chapter 168. The Black Tooth Island was at the north of the Thousand Island Lake. It was a 4th-rank island controlled by the Ding family, a 4th-rank family. The plaza of Black Tooth City was filled with people. The great elder of the Ding clan had been waiting here for a long time with many elders and young masters of the Ding clan. Buzz! A beam of light shone into the sky, and more than 20 figures appeared in the teleportation formation. Ding Gue, the first elder of the Ding clan, hurriedly led his people to welcome them. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, Ding Gue has come to welcome young Lady Qiushua, young Lady Xiaoshuang, and all the young masters and young ladies by the order of the clan head. Bai Qiushua and Bai Xiaoshuang nodded slightly. They had seen this kind of scene many times. The two walked out with their people. Bai Xiaoshuang greeted them for a while and then said directly, First Elder, we are in a hurry to go to the Cliff of Purgatory. We won't bother you any longer. Please send my regards to Grandpa Ding. Ding Gue politely said a few more times before he looked at the two young men in the distance and reprimanded them. Ding Yang, Ding Hung, why aren't you coming over to greet the two young misses and the young lords and young misses? Miss Qiushua and Miss Xiaoshuang. These two are unfilial children of the Ding family. They will go with you this time, and I hope that you can teach them well. Bai Qiushua and Li Tianla knew that there were two warriors of the Soul Pond realm of the Ding family going in together. They didn't say anything. Autumn Snow's ring lit up, and a small boat appeared in her hand. She threw it into the air, and the small boat expanded with the wind. Eventually, it became a huge iron-armored ship that hovered above the city. Damn, the Bai clan is really rich. Luli was speechless. Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiushua both had interspatial rings. Bai Xiaoshuang had a purple gold chariot, and Bai Qiushua had such a magnificent iron-armored ship. Everyone, get on the boat. Bai Qiushua looked around, kicked the ground with one leg, and started spinning. She turned into a white blur and shot up to the iron-armored ship. Go! Bai Xiaoshuang could not wait any longer. She flew up, and the 6 young masters of the Bai clan followed closely behind. Everyone leaped up as well. The iron-armored ship was only floating a dozen feet above their heads. The weakest warriors on this trip were at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. It was not a problem for them to jump over a dozen feet. Ding Gue and the others boarded the ship. Not only were there 2 Fate Wheel realm warriors, but also many maids and guards. Of course, they were here to serve the young masters and young ladies. Everything had been arranged a long time ago, so there was naturally no need for these young masters and young ladies to worry. Ding Gue even became the housekeeper and assigned rooms to everyone. The iron-armored ship was spacious with many rooms. It could accommodate over 100 people, not to mention this small number of people. Luli was given a room, but it was a small one. There were no maids assigned to him. Luli didn't mind. The Cliff of Purgatory was not far away. If the iron-armored ship flew at full speed, it would only take them 4 to 6 hours. The speed of the iron-armored ship was neither too fast nor too slow. The young masters and young ladies were all very excited. They could not sit still in their rooms. They all went to the deck to enjoy the view and chat, thinking about what they would do after they went to the tomb of the Dragon King. Bai Qiushua went back to her room, but Bai Xiaoshuang couldn't sit still. She walked to the deck and was surrounded by a group of young masters and young ladies. Luli stood on the door and took a few glances before he went back to his room to cultivate. He had a general understanding of his teammates who were going to the tomb of Dragon King with him. Of the 24 warriors, 17 were at the Soul Pond realm. Apart from 3 at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm, the rest were at the initial stage. There were 7 at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm, including Lu Li and Su Fangfei. All the elites of the Thousand Island Lake under the age of 20 were gathered here. It seemed that this was not just an opportunity to hunt for treasures, but also a chance for the Thousand Island Lake to compete with the young generation of the forces outside. The 3 royal families had led their teams here, and the 4th and 5th class clans of the Heaven Cold Kingdom, the Heaven Cold Kingdom, and the Heaven Martial Kingdom had sent their elite geniuses below the age of 20. Warriors of the Soul Pond realm that entered the tomb of Dragon King this time were as numerous as dogs. He, who was at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm, would be at the bottom. Although this group of young masters and young ladies definitely had less combat experience than him, they had treasures all over their bodies. Many of them were bloodline warriors. Low profile. We must keep a low profile. Luli made up his mind. This time, He would follow by Xia Shuang and by Qiu Shue and try not to cause any trouble. Whether or not they could obtain the treasure was secondary. Coming out alive was the most important thing. From time to time, noises could be heard coming from outside. A group of young masters and young ladies were extremely excited, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. After all, it was a rare opportunity to fight with the top geniuses outside and hunt for treasures together. Lu Li paid no attention to them and started to cultivate. His spirit sea had been expanded by several times. When his spirit sea was fully cultivated, he could try to reach the Soul Pond realm. Of course, it would take more than a month, and he would have to cultivate continuously. Before he knew it, for the 6 hours had passed. The iron-armored ship gradually slowed down. The young masters and young ladies were even more excited. They were about to arrive at the cliff of purgatory. Lu Li was awakened by the noises. He got up and walked out. Looking forward, he saw a huge cliff in the distance and several iron-armored ships. He went back to his room at once to take out the ghost mask and put it on. With the mask on, many young masters might guess that he was the rich man who bought the origin blood essence at 20 million, which would bring him a lot of trouble. But he couldn't worry about that now. He didn't want to be targeted by the Yu family. Otherwise, as soon as he entered the tomb of Dragon King, he would be attacked openly and covertly. Swish! As soon as he put on the mask and came out, a man flew over from a small island not far away. He was so fast. Lu Li only saw a blur. A white-haired middle-aged man was standing on the deck. Bai Qiuxue had come out a while ago. Seeing the white-haired middle-aged man, she, Bai Shuang, and the other young masters and young ladies all bowed to him. Ding Gue also bowed in fear. Bai Long. Lu Li knew who this man was. He had read the information about this man. The white-haired middle-aged man was easy to recognize. He was the patriarch of the Hall of Combat of the Bai family, one of the top 3 most powerful warriors of the Bai family. He was at the peak of the Eternal Realm and could reach the Noble Lord Realm at any time. Also, he had a 7th-rank bloodline and was among the top 50 on the warlord list of the Northern Desert. Bai Long was cold. He didn't smile even when he looked at Bai Shuang and Bai Qiuxue. He nodded and said lightly, "As we agreed, we will enter the tomb of Dragon King at 2:45 in the afternoon. You go and have some rest." With that said, Bai Long kicked the ground with one leg and flew down to the small island. Bai Qiuxue asked someone to park the iron-armored ship near the small island. They looked at the cliff of purgatory in the distance. None of them wanted to go back to their rooms. Lu Li stood at the door of his room, looking at the cliff of purgatory in the distance. The cliff was more than 3,000 feet high. The stones were dark red. At the moment, there were 3 iron-armored ships parked hundreds of feet to the left and right of the cliff. They should be the teams led by disciples of the 3 royal families. They were going to enter the tomb of Dragon King together later. There were still 4 hours to 3 in the afternoon. They didn't go back to their rooms. They had been waiting on the deck. Lu Li didn't go out. He went back to his room to cultivate. At 2:45 in the afternoon, he walked out and went to the deck. Many people noticed that Lu Li was wearing a mask. They were surprised. Some of them were even surprised. Bai Shuang's expressions turned colder when she saw the mask. She snorted. "Lu Li." Everyone else was on the deck except for Lu Li. Su Fangfei looked at Lu Li's eyes and asked with uncertainty. Chapter 169. The wind was strong today. Huge waves slapped on the cliff of purgatory, splashing water everywhere. There was a dark cave entrance in the middle of the cliff of purgatory. There was an invisible shield over the cave entrance, which made it look more mysterious. Time was up. Bai Long boarded the iron-armored ship. The ship slowly approached the cave entrance. The more than 20 people stood on the deck, looking at the cave entrance and the other 3 iron-armored ships that were heading towards the cave entrance in 3 different directions. Soon, the 4 iron-armored ships were close to the cave entrance. Lu Li and the others could see on the other 3 iron-armored ships young masters and young ladies in fancy clothes with extraordinary temperaments. Lu Li saw a familiar figure on the iron-armored ship on the left. It was a beautiful young lady in a green soft armor with a white jade flute in her hand. There was a purple flower mark on her neck. This was Zi Lian, whom Luli had met once. Luli had a deep impression of her, and she was nice to him. That day, this young lady even reminded him to be careful. What Luli did not know was that this Lady Zi Lian had been watching the fight at the Wuling County. That is Yi Yuhan, the princess of the Yi family of the Heaven Cold Kingdom. She is leading the team of the Heaven Cold Kingdom. This is Du Xiling, the 9th prince of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom. He is leading the team of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom. The other one is Zi Lian, the 6th princess of the Zi family of the Heaven Martial Kingdom. She is leading the team of the Heaven Martial Kingdom. The other one is Zi Lian, the 6th princess of the Zi family of the Heaven Martial Kingdom. She is leading the team of the Heaven Martial Kingdom. Someone pointed to the 3 iron-armored ships in the distance and introduced them. Luli was surprised. He did not expect that the lady with the jade flute was the princess of the Heaven Martial Kingdom, the talented young lady of the Zi family. For teams, and 3 of them are led by girls. Are the young men of the Northern Desert all so disappointing? Luli found it funny. The fight at the Tomb of Dragon King was clearly a competition between the young geniuses of the Northern Desert. Naturally, the families would send their best disciples. The ones that could lead the teams were the best of the best. Yi Yuhan and Zi Lian were leading the teams, which meant that they were the best of the best. While Du Xiling was sizing up the other 3 parties, the other side was also sizing up Du Xiling. When Du Xiling saw Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiuxue, his eyes lit up. When the twins stood together, they gave men a much greater impact than Zi Lian and Yi Yuhan. The iron-armored ships approached and finally stopped outside the huge black hole. Bai Lung swept his gaze around and explained to everyone, "We have an agreement with the 3 parties. If a conflict occurs inside, you could take action, but don't kill anyone, understand?" Bai Qiuxue nodded. She knew that all the warriors that came this time were the treasures of their families. It was okay if they were injured, but if they were killed, it would lead to a tangled war between the 3 royal families and the Thousand Island Lake. "All right, let's go in." Bai Lung waved his hand and instructed, "Although seizing the treasure is important, your lives are more important. Everyone, be careful. Go." Bai Xiaoshuang could not wait any longer. She took the lead and jumped off the iron-armored ship, heading towards the deep hole. Bai Qiuxue followed him closely. Lu Li and the others jumped down as well. When they passed through the invisible shield at the entrance, the shield glowed. Clearly, there was some fluctuation of inhibition formations. "Go!" Warriors of the Thousand Island Lake went in. The other 3 forces didn't want to be left behind. They all rushed into the cave. Soon, the 4 teams all went in and disappeared into the deep and gloomy tunnel. After everyone went in, Bai Lung controlled the iron-armored ship and flew towards the small island. His responsibility was to protect Bai Xiaoshuang and the others outside the Tomb of Dragon King. Once they were inside, he couldn't do anything even if he wanted to. So spooky. This really is a haunted place, a place to bury the dead. As soon as they got in, Luli felt a gust of cold air blowing on his face. It was not like the cold air in winter, but more like the yin qi from hell. Bai Xiaoshuang was the first one to come in. She stopped, and her face was pale. Several young masters of the Bai family came in and surrounded Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiuxue. Bai Qiuxue looked better. She raised her hand and said, "Let's go in first." 6 young masters of the Bai family led the way. All of them had their Xian energy glowing and weapons in their hands, ready to fight. The other young masters walked on the outside, surrounding the young ladies in the middle. Lu Li was at the back. As he walked, he looked around. This was a tunnel with black stones all around and on the ground. There were dim oil lamps on the stone walls, which lit up the tunnel. Are these oil lamps all Xian artifacts? Otherwise, how come they keep on burning? The Tomb of Dragon King has been here for more than 10,000 years. Luli was curious. He even had the urge to dig out the oil lamps. However, he didn't dare to do anything rash before he figured out what was going on here. The tunnel extended forward. Someone had been here before, and it had been confirmed that there was no danger. They were fast. In the time for one incense stick to burn, they had reached the end of the tunnel. There was a hall in front of them, but there was nothing in it. Even if there was, it should have been taken away by the first batch of people that came in. The hall was not big, only about 100 feet in length and width. Apart from the oil lamps on the wall, there was nothing else. Only the northernmost side had 9 stone doors. On the stone doors, there were some big words. Life, death, life, death, life, death, life, death, life. Su Fengfei read the words, and her expressions became strange. What did the words life and death mean? Did it mean those who entered the door with the word death would die? They stood in the hall and looked around. Nobody dared to move. Not long afterward, they heard some footsteps behind them. Yi Yuhan came in with someone. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Not long afterward, Du Xiling and Ziliyin all came in with their teams. The 4 teams stood in 4 square formations in the hall. They looked around and didn't dare to move. This hall had already been thoroughly investigated, and all the clans had sent people in. There was no danger in the hall. Some treasures were taken away by the first family that came in. Those were the purple gold chariot that was auctioned at the auction house, the origin blood essence, and a heaven-grade Xian artifact in Lu Li's hands. As for the 9 doors, the disciples sent by the families were too weak. Nobody could open any of the doors. Whether or not they could go in and get treasures depended on their strength and luck. Lady Xiaoshuang, Lady Qiuxue, which door do we go in? Young Master Ding Heng of the Ding family asked. Bai Xiaoshuang randomly pointed to a life door and said, "You go and see if you can open it." Ding Heng and Ding Yang walked forward at once. They tried to find a mechanism on the door and on the sides. The other 3 teams also looked for a life door and a mechanism, trying to open the stone door. Life door? Death door? Lu Li frowned. His eyes flickered under the mask. He had an idea. Was the life door really a way out? Dragon King was a genius. How could he make such an idiotic arrangement? The thing was, who dared to choose the death door? What if it really was a dead end? Boom! On the left, a warrior of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom punched at a life door, making a muffled sound. Then the door glowed. A surge of strong rebounding force made that warrior fly backwards while spitting out blood. Don't do anything rash. Du Xiling was wearing a silver armor with a silver long sword in his hand. He was handsome. There was a purple mark on his neck. He was a powerful 7th-rank bloodline warrior. His eyes were special. They were a pair of peach blossom eyes. He looked as enchanting as a woman. Du Xiling scolded. The warriors outside the stone door no longer dared to act rashly. They looked for the mechanism in an honest manner. This kind of stone door could not be broken. If they could not find a mechanism, they could not go in. If they could not even open a door, they would be laughed at when they went back. The time for 1 incense stick to burn, 2 incense sticks to burn, 3 incense sticks to burn. Several warriors were sent by the 4 teams, but none found any mechanism. The leaders of the 4 teams looked awful. Did they really have to go back with their tails between their legs? Lady Qiuxue. Lu Li walked over after a while. He whispered something to Bai Qiuxue and the others. Bai Qiuxue called over a disciple of a big family with some doubts. The young master blinked his eyes and walked towards the stone door. When he reached the stone door, the disciple squatted down and pushed the door down with both hands. Creak, creak. Chapter 170. He actually pushed it away. Bai Xiaoshuang shouted in surprise. Bai Qiuxue turned to Lu Li with astonishment in her eyes. At this moment, she suddenly understood why Madame Yin asked Lu Li to come with them. So many people had searched for so long without finding the mechanism, but Lu Li could see through it so easily. Of course, Lu Li couldn't see through it easily. He had been observing for a long time. So many people had tried all kinds of methods, but they still couldn't open the stone door. It was impossible that the stone door could not be opened. Otherwise, no one would be able to enter the inhibition formation outside the tomb of the Dragon King. Since the Dragon King had allowed young people under the age of 20 to enter, there must be a way. Lu Li saw that everyone had tried all kinds of methods, but no one had thought of pushing the stone door down. Of course, no one thought of pushing it down. After all, doors usually open to the left and right. How could it be lifted like a curtain? Luli thought that the Dragon King would be creative and that he might be able to push it away with a simple push. Little did he expect that he would be right. "Go in," Autumn Snow commanded. That descendant of the great clan was still holding the door open, allowing the crowd to enter first. The other three teams followed suit and pushed open the stone door easily. Beyond the stone door was another passageway. It was as wide as the one outside, extending straight into the distance. No one knew how long it was. Luli followed at the back, keeping a low profile. After everyone else went in, the disciple of a big family who was holding the stone door dashed into the tunnel. The stone gate slid down and closed again. Luli didn't move forward with the team. Instead, he crouched down and tried to push outwards. However, this time it didn't move. Luli frowned. It seemed that he could only move forward, not back. Bai Qiuxiue and the others were already moving forward slowly. Luli had to keep up with them. He followed behind the group, and a young lady in front of him looked back. When she saw his ghost mask, she instinctively felt a little afraid and took a few steps forward. At the end of the line were two disciples of big families. One of them was the one who pushed the stone door open. Luli didn't know which family he was from. He just nodded to Luli without saying anything. At the front were three young masters of the Bai family exploring the way. All of them were at the Soul Pond realm and had 5th rank bloodline. Their fighting abilities were formidable. The three of them were neither too fast nor too slow. Relying on their strong perceptive abilities as warriors of the Soul Pond realm, they had been checking the surrounding situation and the fluctuations of inhibition formations. It was a safe journey. After walking for more than a li, a huge hall appeared in front of them. Before entering the hall, countless people's eyes lit up because there was a statue in the hall. The statue held a long sword in one hand, a space ring in one hand, and a scroll in the other. Heaven rank profound artifact, spatial ring, high rank profound skill. Someone cried out in surprise. Treasures that could appear here were naturally not low-grade goods. The three disciples of the Bai clan immediately rushed forward. This time, they had agreed that the treasure would belong to whoever obtained it first. No one was allowed to snatch it. "Come back!" Luli's sudden shout made everyone tremble. Autumn Snow was taken aback. She hurriedly shouted, "Be careful!" Unfortunately, it was too late. The three Bai family disciples rushed to the statue and tried to grab the three treasures. The statue suddenly lit up, and the profound weapon in its hand shone brightly. The statue raised its hand and brandished the long sword. 3 rays of blade light shot out and shot towards the three Bai clan disciples. Bang! The speed of the saber light was too fast, and the three of them had no time to evade it. They were struck by the saber light, and the layers of armor they wore shattered as they were sent flying while coughing out blood. Young Master Ing, Young Master Tu, Young Master Rong. Ding Hung and the others hurried over and helped the three up. They took out healing pellets and fed them to the three. Everyone was shocked to see that the three's chests were badly mutilated and their armors were broken. If it were not for the fact that the three were wearing 9th rank Earth grade armors, they would have been dead. Bai Qiuxiue looked at the statue and then at Luli, who was behind it. Looking at his clear eyes under the ghost mask, Bai Qiuxiue asked, "Luli, how did you know that the statue would attack?" Many gazes swept over curiously. The statue seemed to be dead, and there was no fluctuation of inhibition formations. No one else could tell, but Luli did. Luli shrugged and said something that made everyone speechless. "I was just guessing. I didn't know I was right." Bai Xiaoshuang snorted and turned around. Bai Qiuxiue looked at Luli meaningfully. If he was just guessing, he couldn't have been right twice in a row. Bai Qiuxiue was already impressed by Luli when he pushed the stone door open. Now, she had a whole new level of respect for him. Luli stood there in silence, looking at the statue without saying anything. Bai Qiuxiue looked around. She noticed that this hall was different from the previous one. There was a corridor on the left, but she didn't know where it led to. Many young masters and young ladies were surrounding the statue from a distance. Their eyes were filled with passion, but nobody dared to go forward to take the treasure. Not many people could survive that saber light. Rustle, rustle, rustle. A young master could not help but move. He slowly walked towards the statue. Xian energy glowed on his feet, and he held a saber in front of his chest, ready to retreat at any time. 3 feet, 3 feet, 3.5 feet. When he was about 3 feet away from the statue suddenly glowed. The sword swept across, and a half-moon-shaped ray of sword light whooshed towards him. Swish! That young master retreated quickly. Unfortunately, he was not as fast as the ray of sword light. At the last moment, he used his Xian artifact to defend himself. Bang! The 9th rank Earth-grade Xian artifact exploded. The inner armor the young master was wearing was torn apart. He was smashed away with blood all over. Some young masters and young ladies nearby hurried over to treat his wounds. Luckily, he used his Xian artifact to defend himself, so he was not seriously injured. Let me have a try. Bai Xiaoshuang was eager to try. She was here to get the treasure. She couldn't just let it go. She might as well not come in at all. Shuanger, come back. Bai Qiuxue grabbed Bai Xiaoshuang. Bai Xiaoshuang clenched her teeth and endured it. They looked at each other, not daring to move. Luli walked over. Looking at those who were too afraid to move forward, he suddenly said, "Guys, do you want the treasure or not? If you don't, I will take it." What? The crowd was in an uproar. Many people were eager to try again, but they were hesitant to move forward. A ray of Xian energy glowed on Bai Xiaoshuang's body. The crescent mark on her neck was glistening. But Bai Qiuxue patted her shoulder again, so she didn't dare to move. Ever since she was a kid, Bai Qiuxue had been more mature and intelligent than her. Bai Xiaoshuang had always been obedient to Bai Qiuxue. Naturally, she didn't dare to act rashly. Bai Qiuxue looked around with a smile and said, "Island owner Lu, the treasure belongs to whoever gets it. Everyone can fight for it. If you have a way, feel free to take it." Many young masters looked at Lu Li with contempt. As far as they were concerned, Lu Li was just playing tricks to attract the attention of the two young ladies. If Lu Li really dared to go for the treasure, he would be killed in an instant. The ring on Lu Li's hand glowed as Xian crystals came out. Some people were surprised. Lu Li had an interspatial ring. Whoosh! Lu Li picked up a Xian crystal and threw it at the statue. Everyone was scared. They stepped back, afraid that the statue would release Xian energy to attack them. Bang! The Xian crystal made a slight noise when it hit the statue. But the statue didn't move. Lu Li nodded to himself and shouted, "Little White, go and get that scroll." Whoosh! A white blur flashed by from Lu Li's sleeve. A small beast ran out and landed on the arm of the statue. Chapter 171. Buzzing. The ring on Lu Li's hand glowed, and the scroll disappeared. Lu Li didn't even look at it. He said to Little White, "Go and get that ring off." Little White flew over again in a blur. It broke one of the statue's fingers with its claws and came back with the interspatial ring. Many people were jealous. They looked at Lu Li with envy and jealousy. Lu Li put away the interspatial ring quietly, but he didn't let Little White go for the sword. Bai Qiuxue stared at Little White for a bit, but she couldn't tell what rank it was. At this moment, Little White sneaked into Lu Li's sleeve. She looked at Lu Li and asked, "Why don't you take the heaven-grade Xian artifact?" Lu Li looked at Bai Qiuxue and said, "I don't dare to take the risk." Bai Qiuxue seemed to be thinking about something. She thought about it and said, "If so, then I will do it." With that said, Bai Qiuxue walked forward on her own. Her steps were light. There was no Xian energy glistening on her. She didn't have any weapon in her hand. She just walked forward step by step. Everyone held their breaths and stared at Bai Qiuxue, fearing that this proud lady would be cut into pieces by the ray of sword light. 3 feet, 2 feet, 3.5 feet. What many people were worried about didn't happen. Bai Qiuxue walked to the statue easily. Then she reached out her beautiful hand and grabbed the Xian artifact. She successfully took it off. "Sister, well done." Bai Xiaoshuang put on a bright smile. Many young masters and young ladies cheered. Bai Qiuxue, on the other hand, didn't dare to be careless. She stepped back slowly and only felt relieved as she got back to where she stood. Of the 3 treasures, Luli got 2, and Bai Qiushue got 1. Bai Xiaoshuang asked in surprise after Bai Qiushue came back, "Sister, why didn't the statue attack you?" Bai Qiushue looked at Luli and said with a smile, "As long as I don't use Xian energy, the statue will not attack me." Luli should have seen through this. Bai Xiaoshuang said disapprovingly. If he had seen through this, why didn't he go and get it himself? Luli didn't say anything. He had made sure of this when he threw the Xian crystals over just now, which was why he asked Little White to go and get the treasures. Little White was fast and small. It wouldn't be a problem to get the scroll and interspatial ring. But Luli didn't dare to take the risk. As for himself, he didn't dare to take the risk. This was because he did not have a good defensive armor, while Autumn Snow had an extremely strong one. Therefore, Autumn Snow dared to gamble. "Bring Bai Ying, Bai Tu, and the others with us. Don't let the other 3 teams get ahead of us." There were only 3 treasures on the statue, and there was nothing else special about it. There was nothing in the hall except for the statue. Autumn Snow got someone to support the 4 injured people and walked toward the corridor on the left. The 3 Bai family disciples were heavily injured, but after taking top-grade healing medicine, they were much better. They could barely walk with the help of others. Luli was also at the back, keeping a distance from the people in front of him. It wasn't that he was being overly cautious, but that he didn't trust anyone in this group. What if someone saw the treasure and suddenly attacked him? The corridor was still long. After several turns, Luli secretly marveled at how big the tomb of Dragon King was. There were 9 paths in here. After walking for about 2 miles, another huge hall appeared in front of them. The only difference was that there were many statues in this hall. They were like pairs of nether soldiers and generals standing tall in the hall, blocking the way forward. This time, nobody dared to be careless. They stood in front of the hall and looked around. Autumn Snow and Bai Xiaoshuang looked at each other. Their expressions became more solemn. They sensed a trace of killing intent in the hall. These statues were not simple. "I will go and explore." Bai Gu, the most powerful young master of the Bai family, walked forward slowly with a sword in his hand. The cyan moon mark on his neck glowed, and the Xian energy in his body glowed. Crack, crack, crack. The moment Bai Gu stepped into the hall, the mud on the surface of all the statues fell off. It was as if the statues had come to life. They all turned into black iron men and rushed towards Bai Gu with weapons in their hands. "Xianming puppets!" Bai Xiaoshuang shouted in surprise. Without any hesitation, the ring on her hand glowed and a red longbow appeared. She shouted, "Let's go. These Xianming puppets have locked onto us. If we don't destroy them, we will be hunted down to death." The young masters and young ladies of the big families must have heard about the Xianming puppets. They all unsheathed their weapons and rushed forward. Bai Qiushue moved as well. A green whip appeared in her hand, and she swung it forward. One of the black iron men was smashed away. Bai Gu had already made his move. He directly released his Xian energy and smashed away a Xianming puppet. Bai Gu was one of the 3 most powerful warriors in the team. Like Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiushue, he was also at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. There were 17 warriors of the Soul Pond realm in the team. 4 of them were injured, so there were 13 left. Apart from Bai Xiaoshuang, who was shooting arrows, the other 12 went forward. Many rays of sword and saber light whooshed out of their Xian energy, smashing away the Xianming puppets one by one. Fierce! Luli looked at them from behind. He didn't intend to join the fight. There was still a big gap between his fighting capacity and a warrior of the Soul Pond realm. The Xianming puppets had been completely suppressed. It wouldn't make much sense for him to go forward. Su Fangfei didn't go forward either. She protected Bai Ying and the other warriors of the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. Seeing Luli watching from afar, Su Fangfei showed some disdain, but she didn't say anything. Boom, 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 boom. Groups and groups of Xianming puppets rushed up and were smashed away easily. There were nearly 100 Xianming puppets in the hall, but none of them could get close. However, they had been attacking for a long time, but none of the Xianming puppets were injured or destroyed. They didn't know what material the puppets were made of. They were hard and indestructible. Even the arrows shot by Xiaoshuang couldn't do any harm to the Xianming puppets. Lady Qiuxue. Bai Gu smashed away another Xianming puppet and looked at Bai Qiuxue. The latter thought about it. The purple moon mark on her neck glowed. A purple crescent moon flew out from her neck and then flew forward in a purple blur. Bang! The purple crescent moon swept across the neck of a Xianming puppet. A muffled sound came out from the neck. An iron head flew up. The Xianming puppet that was still rushing forward seemed to have died. Its body fell to the ground. What kind of bloodline skill is this? It is so horrifying. Luli was astonished. Just now, so many people released their Xian energy, but none of them could leave any mark on the Xianming puppets. How could the purple crescent moon cut off the Xianming puppet's neck directly? Buzzing. The purple moon mark on by Xiaoshuang's neck glowed as well. A purple moon flew out and also cut off the neck of a Xianming puppet. Lady Qiuxue, you are awesome. Lady Shuang, you are mighty. Many bootlicking voices came out. Bai Qiuxue and Bai Xiaoshuang didn't say anything. They focused on controlling the purple moons to attack. As the Xianming puppets fell to the ground one by one, the two sisters' faces turned pale. Their bodies trembled and they were sweating. Many people felt sorry for them. It seems that the sisters will become weak after using their bloodline skill too much. Luli murmured. In his mind, he thought of the flower on Zilian's neck, the mark on Du Xiling's neck, and the beast on Yi Yuhan's neck. Chapter 172. The two sisters used their bloodline skill and were unbelievably valiant. In a time for 3 incense sticks to burn, the nearly 100 Netherworld puppets were all destroyed. After the last puppet was beheaded, the twin sisters felt weak and almost fell to the ground. Several young ladies hurried over to help them sit on the ground with their legs crossed to rest and recover. Bai Gu brought someone with him to check and made sure that all the Netherworld puppets were destroyed. Then he rushed forward at once. There was a high platform over there with 2 treasures on it, a booklet and a square stamp. Good stuff. Bai Gu's eyes glowed after a few glances. But he didn't take it for himself. He ran back and handed the 2 treasures to Bai Qiuxue. This time, the twin sisters made great efforts. If they didn't use their bloodline skill, who else could kill the Netherworld puppets? Bai Qiuxue didn't refuse. She put away the booklet after a quick look and gave the square stamp to Bai Xiaoshuang. Bai Xiaoshuang was weak, but she was pleased that she finally got something after her hard work. She played with the stamp for a while and put it away. They didn't move forward rashly. They all rested and cultivated to recover their physical strength and Xian energy. The 4 young masters were still healing themselves. Even though they had top-level healing pellets, they couldn't do anything until half a day later. Luli was cultivating in the corner with his legs crossed. Nobody paid attention to him, which made him out of place. Luli didn't rush forward just now, which made many people unhappy. On top of that, he got 2 treasures all by himself. Everyone was jealous. Those that could come here were all young masters and young ladies of big families. However, Luli was only an insignificant island owner, and he had offended by Xiaoshuang. Naturally, people wouldn't be nice to him. They had heard about what happened to Mingyu. However, Mingyu left right after that and never showed up at the Blood Evil Island again. He didn't send any message either. Inevitably, many people had some doubts. Even Su Fangfei was wondering if Luli had anything to do with Mingyu. If so, Mingyu would have sent a message to the God-Down Island and asked them to take care of Luli. Luli was acting mysteriously. He was still wearing the ghost mask. In the eyes of the young masters and young ladies, he was acting tough. If Luli was at the Soul Pond realm, then he was acting tough. But he was only at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. Of course, nobody wanted to offend him openly. They just didn't want to be nice to him. Luli didn't care. He didn't want to make friends with these young masters and young ladies. Qin Wentian quietly cultivated. After waiting for 2 hours, Autumn Snow stood up and waved her hand. Let's go. The 4 injured people recovered a little, and their complexions looked much better. Their wounds had already scabbed over. Everyone stood up and continued to walk forward. Bai Gu had already scouted the area. There was a passageway in front of them. After entering the passageway, it was exactly the same as before. However, after walking for more than a li, an intersection appeared in front of them, and the passageway split into three. "This is troublesome." Autumn snow furrowed her beautiful brows. Many people were frowning as well. All three paths were exactly the same. Which path should they take? If they split up, what if they ran into danger? The group of people gathered together and discussed for a while. In the end, they decided to travel together. Even if they had to spend more time, they didn't want to separate. Bai Qiushue led the team to the left randomly. Luli didn't have a better idea, so he followed along and observed the surroundings. He even secretly dropped a Xian crystal on the ground. After walking for half a kilometer, another three forks appeared in front of them. This time, everyone's expressions turned ugly. This was clearly a maze. One mistake, and they would be trapped in there. Bai Qiushue thought about it and continued to lead the team forward with her teeth clenched. This time, they chose the right path. However, after they walked for half a mile, they came to another fork. Many young ladies were panicking. They didn't have much food with them. It would be fine if they were trapped here for 10 days or half a month. But if they were trapped here for several months, they would all starve to death. "What are you panicking about?" Bai Qiushue shouted angrily. She waved her hand and said, "What's the use of panicking? The moment you entered the tomb of Dragon King, you should have been prepared to die in there. What can a warrior achieve if he is afraid of death?" Luli looked at Bai Qiushue's pretty face, which was as cold as frost and filled with killing intent. He couldn't help but look at this girl with new eyes. Bai Qiushue and Bai Xiaoshuang were both quiet and active. Usually, Bai Qiushue was gentle and polite to everyone. However, when she was angry, she was like a tigress. She was so calm at such a young age, without a trace of panic. She had the demeanor of a general. No wonder she was the leader this time. Bai Xiaoshuang's words might not be able to control all kinds of situations. As soon as Bai Qiushue showed her power, everyone quieted down. At least, they didn't dare to show any signs of panic. Bai Qiushue waved her hand and led the others on. Fork, fork, passageway, passageway. They walked for more than 2 hours. All they encountered were the same forks and the same tunnels. They couldn't tell which way to go. Now, they were completely lost. They didn't know which way to go or where the exit was. At another fork, Bai Qiushue stood still. Her beautiful eyes were filled with sorrow and confusion. She had no idea what to do now. She waved her hand to let the others rest. She stood at the fork by herself and started to think. After a while, she suddenly thought of something. She looked at Lu Li, who was at the back. She walked over step by step to Lu Li, who was sitting on the ground with his legs crossed, and asked, "Lu Li, do you have a way out of this situation?" Lu Li looked up. From this angle, he could see Bai Qiushue's slightly raised breasts. He shook his head and said, "This is a maze. Whether we can get out or not depends on our luck." Puffed. Someone in the distance sneered. Who didn't know this was a maze? Who didn't know it depended on luck? Bai Qiushue sighed. She didn't go forward. She just sat down next to Lu Li with her legs crossed. She took out some food and water from her ring. She called someone over and distributed them so that everyone could have some to replenish their strength. In the end, she gave Lu Li a portion. He took it over, took off his ghost mask, and ate in silence. Lu Li was not trying to hide his strength. He really didn't have a way out. He had been observing carefully along the way. The tunnels were the same, and the forks were the same. There were no hints or instructions. He was not an immortal. How could he know which way to go? He put down some Xian crystals, but he didn't see any along the way. Squeak, squeak. Seeing that Lu Li was eating, Little White seemed to be hungry as well. It sneaked out from Lu Li's sleeve and looked at him eagerly. Lu Li patted Little White affectionately. He took out some fire jade spars from his interspatial ring and gave them to Little White. Bai Qiushue saw that the hard fire jade spars were eaten up by Little White in just a short while. She was surprised and asked, "Lu Li, what rank is this Xian beast of yours? So amazing." "3rd rank," Lu Li said casually. Hearing the last 4 words of Bai Qiushue, he thought of something. He said to Little White, "Little White, we are trapped in the maze. Can you help us find the exit?" Little White had just finished the last fire jade spar. Hearing Lu Li's words, Little White rushed to the distance in a white blur and disappeared from Luli's sight. Little White. Luli was shocked. There were forks everywhere. What if Little White got lost and got separated from him? Luli hurried to chase after Little White. However, Little White was too fast. After running for another 1.5 miles, there were 3 forks in front of them. Little White was nowhere to be seen. Little White, come back, come back. Chapter 173. Little White, Little White. On a tunnel, Luli was running and yelling. He had been running for an hour. He didn't know how many tunnels he had passed and how many times he had yelled, but he didn't see Little White at all. Little White was gone, and so was he. He couldn't find Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiuxue, but he didn't mind. What he worried about the most was Little White. He was desperate to get it back. Lu Ling was of the Cyan Plains, so Little White was Lu Li's closest friend. This little beast had been with him for a long time and helped him a lot. Lu Li had developed a deep affection for Little White as if it were his own younger brother. Lu Li had to keep running and searching. He had to find Little White even if he would die of exhaustion. Lu Li is gone? Seeing Lu Li running away, Bai Qiuxue sent someone to go after him. But they came to a fork after a while. That person didn't want to get lost, so he had to come back to report. Bai Qiuxue was already worried. Lu Li was gone again, but what else could she do? She had to wait for Lu Li to come back. 6 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours. Many people had fallen asleep against the wall, but Lu Li still hadn't come back. Bai Xiaoshuang and many others couldn't wait any longer. They urged Bai Qiuxue to move on. Otherwise, they would be trapped here for lack of food. Bai Qiuxue had to leave some words on a piece of paper and pen and move on. This time, Bai Qiuxue asked someone to mark the way and leave some small objects to see if they could solve the maze. What happened next made them panic. They had been walking for more than 20 hours. They didn't know how long they had covered. Not only that, they couldn't find an exit. They couldn't even find a marked path. There were only 2 possibilities. Either the maze was infinitely large, boundless, or there was a special inhibition formation in the maze that would take away the things they left behind. No matter which possibility it was, everyone felt that they had encountered a huge problem. If they were not careful, they would be buried with the Dragon Emperor forever. Many young ladies were panicking. Some young masters looked awful. Even Bai Xiaoshuang couldn't stay calm. The only one who was calm was Bai Qiuxue, but she couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. He rested, cultivated, ate, leaned against the wall to sleep, and continued his journey in search of an exit. It was hard on these young masters and ladies. They had to eat dry rations all day and sleep against the wall without caring about their image. No one had ever suffered like this before. The most important thing was there was no place to bathe. The young master was still fine, but the young ladies were going crazy. They thought that they would be able to get out after 1 or 2 days, but who knew that they would be trapped in this maze for almost 2 days? No one could see any hope of getting out. Many young ladies woke up crying in their sleep. Since young, he was used to living like a prince and was treated like a treasure in every clan. Let alone suffering, he had never even suffered much. At this moment, not only did they have to eat dry rations and clean water, but they also couldn't bathe. They had to sleep on the floor without any form of image. Not to mention a group of delicate young ladies. Even many young masters couldn't bear it. There was still one more problem, the toilet. Humans had 3 urgent needs. After eating, they had to go to the toilet. This was a straight passage, and there was no place for them to go to the toilet. Could it be that he had to squat on the ground naked and take a dump? The young master didn't care, but what about those young ladies? In the end, Autumn Snow came up with an idea. She took out a chamber pot from her spatial ring, and the group of girls walked a certain distance away from each other. Using a piece of cloth, they formed a circle to serve as a toilet. Blushing, they finished shedding their bowels before putting the chamber pot back into their spatial ring. "Sister, are we going to die here?" Bai Xiaoshuang sat beside Autumn Snow weakly. At this moment, she didn't look like a young lady anymore. Her hair was messy, and her face was gloomy. "No, as long as we hold on, we can get out." Autumn Snow gently stroked Bai Xiaoshuang's hair. She revealed a faint smile, but it seemed a bit forced. After sleeping and resting for a few hours, they set off again. The result was the same. After running for 16 hours, they still couldn't find the exit. They couldn't even find the marked road. Woo, another day passed. After autumn snow gave the order to rest, several young ladies couldn't hold it anymore. They hugged their knees and cried. Many young masters gathered together and sighed. Their eyes were full of bitterness. Autumn snow didn't have the strength to comfort those young ladies. She was also a girl of 16 or 17 years old. She had been with the Old Man of Heaven prison since she was a child. She had never been wronged and suffered too much. Therefore, she was a little scared. Bang! Bang! Ding Hung slashed at the wall crazily with his Xian artifact saber. The wall was shining with white light. He couldn't leave any mark on the wall. The other young masters glanced at Ding Hung and didn't try to stop him. If this went on, they would all go crazy. It was better to let Ding Hung vent his anger. Ding Hung slashed more than 10 times and sat on the ground weakly. Su Fangfei and the other young ladies cried even harder. Bai Xiaoshuang's eyes were red. She leaned on Autumn Snow and trembled. Shuang, don't be afraid. Autumn Snow could feel the fear in Bai Xiaoshuang's heart. She hugged her and said, Forefathers said that we are people with great luck. How can we die in this small tomb of Dragon King? He said that we will marry the human sovereign in the future. We won't die here. Bai Xiaoshuang's eyes lit up. Then she smiled bitterly and said, Great luck? Human sovereign? Let alone the human sovereign. If someone could take us out, I will marry him even if he is in the Xianwu realm. Autumn Snow shook her head and smiled. She was about to say something to comfort Bai Xiaoshuang. Suddenly, from the distance came a deep and coarse voice. If someone can take you out, you will marry him even if he is in the Xianwu realm? What about the Spirit Sea realm? Will you marry him? Swish, swish, swish. The sudden voice caught many people's attention. Bai Qiuxue's eyes lit up. She stood up and said, It is Lu Li. Lady Qiuxue, hello. A man walked out from the intersection. He was wearing an average cyan robe and had a cute white beast in his arms. He was wearing a hideous ghost mask, and his eyes were filled with smiles. Lu Li. Bai Xiaoshuang jumped up. Lu Li had disappeared for 3 days, and now he was back. He looked relaxed, and his eyes were filled with smiles. Many people stood up and gathered around. Bai Qiuxue walked over and asked nervously, Lu Li, are you telling the truth? Yes. Lu Li took off his mask, looked at Bai Xiaoshuang with ridicule, and said with a smile, I just don't know if you are telling the truth. Bai Xiaoshuang was embarrassed. Of course, she was just joking. How could someone of her status marry a warrior of the Xianwu realm? Not to mention a man like Lu Li. I'm just joking. Lady Shuang, please don't mind me. Lu Li didn't want to keep them in suspense any longer. He said in a deep voice, Have you had a good rest? If so, I will take you out of the maze. Really? Many people lost their voices and shouted. Many young ladies grabbed each other's hands and cried tears of joy. At this moment, people didn't dislike Lu Li at all. Instead, they felt he was their savior. Island owner Lu, Bai Qiuxue bowed and said seriously, If you can take us out, everyone here will owe you their lives. Yes, Lu Li, if you can take us out, we will owe you our lives. Bai Gu and the others echoed. They were extremely excited. You're being too serious. We came in together, so we will leave together. Lu Li waved his hand and said, Let's go, little white. Squeak, squeak. Chapter 174. The reason why Lu Li was so confident was not that he had solved the maze, but that Little White could find the way out. As a matter of fact, he was lost in the maze as well. Eventually, Little White found him and took him to Bai Qiuxue and the others. Lu Li asked if it could find the exit. Little White nodded proudly. This little beast was highly intelligent. Lu Li trusted it completely. Lu Li didn't know how Little White solved the maze. But since Little White could find him and take him to Bai Qiuxue, then it must be able to find the exit. This little beast was miraculous. It could control Xian beasts of low ranks, find the inhibition formations in the bamboo hill, and help Lu Li and the Lu family to avoid the inhibition formations at the Blood Evil Island. It was enough to prove that it was talented in certain aspects. They followed Little White for many turns until they were dizzy. But Little White didn't stop, nor could it find the exit. After walking for more than 10 hours, someone finally started to complain and have doubts. Some young ladies said they wanted a rest. Bai Qiuxue glanced at them coldly, and they all shut up. Lu Li was getting dizzy after walking for another 10 to 10 hours. But he had no doubts about Little White. Lu Li, take some rest. Will we be able to stop at this rate? Bai Xiaoshuang said. She was not tired physically, but mentally. They ate their rations as they walked without any rest. Let's keep going. Seeing that Little White didn't stop, Lu Li turned around and said. Bai Qiuxue waved her hand, and the others kept up. They walked for another 4 hours. This time, even Bai Qiuxue wanted to stop. Lu Li saw that everyone was tired, and they were looking at him with doubts. He said to Little White, Little White, take some rest. Squeak, squeak, Little White turned around and called out. Then it continued to fly forward. Its eyes were filled with excitement. Lu Li didn't say anything after seeing Little White's reaction. He just kept going, not caring about the others. Hold on a little longer. Bai Qiuxue sighed. The others began to curse Lu Li in secret. Many were having doubts. A fork appeared in front of them. Little White was even more excited. It turned around and ran toward the left. Lu Li was excited. They were about to reach the exit. He followed it, and the others followed tiredly. Suddenly, Little White stopped after walking for more than a mile. Lu Li looked ahead and was stunned, because there was no path ahead. It was a wall. A group of people ran over from behind. When they saw the wall, many of them were slightly stunned. Then, they flew into a rage. After running for more than 20 hours, Lu Li's small beast had brought them to a dead end. Lu Li, is this the exit you were talking about? Lu Li, are you messing with us? Where's the exit? Is it fun to play us like monkeys? I think he's doing it on purpose. This person doesn't have good intentions. Young Master Gu, teach him a lesson and break one of his legs. The words were getting harsher and harsher, but Lu Li turned a deaf ear to them. He stared at the wall for a moment and Little White's glowing eyes. He abruptly turned his head and exchanged a glance with Autumn Snow. Both of their eyes lit up. Shut up, Lu Li shouted coldly. The ring on his hand glowed, and a huge halberd appeared in his hand. With his Xian energy glowing, he hacked at the wall in front of him. Boom! Under everyone's shocked gazes, a large hole appeared in the wall. Then the wall collapsed, revealing a passage. Just as I thought, Autumn Snow nodded to herself. When she and Lu Li looked at each other, they both figured it out. This must be the exit. They had been walking for a long time, and they never ran into a dead end. All the paths were open. There must be something wrong with the wall here. Squeak, squeak, Little White ran forward joyfully. Lu Li followed it closely. Autumn Snow followed with excitement. The others came to their senses and followed them with joy. After running for another 1.5 miles, they reached the end of the passage. There was a door in front of them. When they saw the door, they were overjoyed. Several young ladies hugged each other and cried tears of joy. Little White nice. Lu Li gave Little White a thumbs up. He took out some fire jade spars and gave them to Little White. Little White raised its head while eating. It was like a proud child being praised by its elders, proud of itself. Let's go. Everyone was so excited that they didn't rest anymore. Bai Gu dashed toward the door. He stretched out his hand and pushed the door open. A wave of fresh air rushed out, lifting everyone's spirits. Valley? It is a valley outside. Bai Gu looked at it with astonishment. He rushed out, and the others followed him. They were all dumbfounded when they got out of the door. It was a beautiful valley with verdant hills and clear waters. There was also a pond. There were even some rabbits and deer in the distance. They had been in the tomb of Dragon King for such a long time. Now, they were in a valley after they got out of the door. They were happy and disappointed at the same time. As far as many people were concerned, they were outside now that they were out of the valley. They would be completely safe outside. But how many treasures were there in the tomb of Dragon King? There were 5, and they were divided among Lu Li, Bai Qiuxue, and Bai Xiaoshuang. They had come in vain and suffered. Swish! Bai Gu rushed to the distance to check the surroundings. Bai Qiuxiu asked everyone to rest and wait for the result. Not long after, Bai Gu came back. He said in a deep voice, "This valley is big and it is sealed. It is safe. There are many doors around. We haven't gotten out completely. I think this is the place Dragon King arranged for us to rest. A place to rest." Everyone was surprised and worried at the same time. Finally, they could rest and continue their exploration in the tomb of Dragon King. However, they were almost trapped to death in the maze just now. The road ahead would be even more difficult. "Rest." Bai Qiuxiu waved her hand and said, "Bai Rong, go and catch some beasts and make a fire to roast them. Ladies, follow me to the pond." The young ladies were stunned. Then they came to their senses. They cheered and ran towards the pond. There was a pond here, which meant they could bathe. They were all smelly since they hadn't taken a bath for so many days. "Let's go and catch some beasts," young Master Rong said to several people. The others were looking for weeds and wood to make a fire to roast the beasts. They hadn't eaten cooked food for so many days. They wanted to have a good meal, take a bath, and sleep. Over at the pond, Bai Qiuxiu asked someone to build a simple bathing pool with cloth. She left a group of people to guard outside and take turns to bathe. How soon? A group of ladies went into the water. Their laughter sounded like silver bells mixed with the sound of splashing water. The young masters were stunned. They wished they could dive into the water and enjoy the wonderful view. Lu Li sat under a tree to rest. Bai Gu walked over, cupped his fists, and said, "Island owner Lu, I, Bai Gu, don't like to waste time. I owe you my life." Several young masters nearby saw this. They looked at each other and cupped their fists and said, "Thank you, Island owner Lu. We must repay you in the future." "Don't mention it." Lu Li waved his hand and said with a smile, "You are all tired. Take a rest." These people were reluctant to do so. They exchanged some pleasantries and left. Bai Gu didn't leave. He sat next to Lu Li and said in a low voice, "Island owner Lu, please don't mind them. Young masters of big families are arrogant. They're grateful to you. They just can't bring themselves to do it." "It doesn't matter." Lu Li shrugged his shoulders and said, "It doesn't matter how they see me, think of me, or treat me. Life is already difficult. If I have to care about other people's opinions and thoughts, then it will be even more difficult. The most important thing in life is to have a clear conscience. The rest is not important." Chapter 175. A group of young ladies played in the water for 2 hours. Many young masters felt like they were being scratched by cats. Young Master Rong and the others were trying to roast meat. However, they fumbled around for more than an hour. They couldn't do it at all. The deer was half-cooked. It was burnt on the outside and raw on the inside. It was inedible. A bunch of pampered young masters. Not to mention roasting meat, they probably didn't even know how to cook rice, right? When Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiuxiu came back, they thought they could enjoy a good meal. But they all rolled their eyes when they saw young Master Rong and the others covered in dust and a burnt deer. Bai Qiuxiu looked over to Lu Li. He had fallen asleep. She frowned. Bai Xiaoshuang looked over. Her eyes glowed. She walked over, kicked Lu Li, and said, "Lu Li, wake up." Lu Li opened his eyes in a daze. He saw a pretty girl in front of him. Her hair was wet. She had just taken a shower. Her face was rosy and attractive. Her small nose was delicate. Her eyes were sparkling. She was so pretty that Lu Li was mesmerized. "Dummy." Bai Xiaoshuang glared at him. She kicked him again and said, "Wake up. Do you know how to roast meat?" Lu Li could tell it was Bai Xiaoshuang's voice. His mind cleared up. He looked at her and went back to sleep. He said, "No, you are good at it. Go and roast it yourself." "You." Bai Xiaoshuang stomped on the ground and went back in anger. She made up her mind and grabbed a rabbit. She wanted to roast it, but she didn't know where to start. The fur of the rabbit was still there. She threw the rabbit into the fire after some thoughts. "Ha! Ha!" Bai Qiuxiu walked over to Lu Li. She bowed to him and said, "Island owner Lu, Shuang is not sensible. Please forgive her. Well, we have been eating dried food for days. Our stomachs are protesting. Island owner Lu, please be magnanimous and help us." Bai Qiuxiu had no doubt that Lu Li could roast meat. She had read Lu Li's information. When he was a kid, he often went to the mountains alone. He was good at surviving in the wild. Lu Li rested for a while to regain some energy. Bai Qiuxue was so nice that he didn't want to embarrass her. He stood up and said, "Lady Qiuxue, come and help me." Bai Qiuxue was surprised. Then she nodded with a smile and followed him. Lu Li walked over and said, "Lady Qiuxue, stand aside and help me." They looked at each other speechlessly. How dare Bai Qiuxue to have Lu Li? Seeing autumn snow standing obediently by the side, the eyes of many young nobles were filled with jealousy. However, they couldn't do anything about the matter of roasting meat, and could only retreat to the side. Lu Li carried a big deer and walked directly to the other side of the pond. Bai Qiuxue followed him obediently. When they reached the pond, Lu Li reached out his hand and said, "Give me a knife or a dagger." Bai of Qiuxue of used. Took out. Bai. Then, it directly pierced into the deerskin. No one knew how he did it, but after stabbing here and there, he pulled hard and easily took off the deerskin. Then, Lu Li dug out the internal organs of the deer and stabbed a sharp piece of wood into its body. Then he came back with autumn snow. Lu Li built 2 racks to support the deer. He asked Bai Qiuxue to spin the deer and roast it over a slow fire. He took out some bottles and jars from his interspatial ring. There was oil, salt, cumin, and so on. Bai Xiaoshuang walked over with curiosity. The other young ladies came over as well. Lu Li ignored them. He asked Bai Qiuxue to add more firewood, lower and raise the racks, and so on. He himself spread oil, salt, and all kinds of strange powders on the venison. "Smells good." After half an hour, a faint aroma came from the venison. The venison had turned yellow and was oozing oil. Bai Xiaoshuang and the others were drooling when they saw it. "Bumpkin, he just knows how to roast meat. Look at how proud he is, right? If he knows how to cook, he must be awesome. He's so good. Why doesn't he go to heaven?" This bumpkin asked Lady Qiuxue to help him. In the distance, a group of young masters were murmuring. Their eyes were filled with jealousy and hatred. Lu Li was surrounded by a group of young ladies, and he would yell at Bai Qiuxue from time to time, which made the young masters unhappy. However, they didn't have the skills, and they didn't have the cheek to go over. They could only stare at Lu Li and curse him. "Okay, it's time to eat." After the time for 1 incense stick to burn, Lu Li cut off a piece of meat with a knife, pierced it with a bamboo skewer, and gave it to Bai Qiuxue. He said with a smile, "Try the venison you roasted yourself." Bai Qiuxue's eyes were sparkling. She was smiling. She took it over and took a bite. Instantly, she felt she had eaten the most delicious food in the world. She closed her eyes and savored it carefully. She was intoxicated. "Lu Li, I want some as well," Bai Xiaoshuang exclaimed. She had been watching from the side for a long time, and she was already drooling. Lu Li threw her a casual look. Seeing her eager look, it was as if Little White was waiting to be fed. Lu Li smiled, cut a piece, and handed it to her. Bai Xiaoshuang took half a piece and couldn't stop praising. She smiled from ear to ear like an innocent child. The young ladies wanted to ask for some, but they were too reserved. Lu Li shook his head and smiled bitterly. He cut a piece for each of them, and then he cut a piece for himself as well. He didn't ask the young masters in the distance to come and eat with him. The young masters in the distance were dumbfounded. They could smell the rich aroma, and they could see how Bai Qiuxue and the others were enjoying the meat. That being said, the meat was roasted by Lu Li. If Lu Li didn't ask them, they would be too embarrassed to go and ask for it themselves. They had been eating dried rations for the past few days. Their stomachs were not right. At this moment, they missed the taste of hot food. That being said, none of them could bring themselves to go over. They were born in wealthy families, and they all had pride in their bones. "Delicious. Lu Li, you are so good." Bai Qiuxue couldn't help but praise after she finished a piece of meat. She had always been a calm person. Now, she couldn't help it anymore. She reached out her hand and said, "I want some more." Lu Li cut another piece for her with a smile. She finished it quickly and murmured, "Lu Li, give me another piece. The meat you roast is better than the chefs of the Bai family. Don't be a small island owner anymore. Go to the Bai Emperor Mountain and be my cook." Lu Li burst into laughter. He didn't feel so bad about Bai Xiaoshuang anymore. She was just a spoiled child. She was not bad in nature. Young Master Lu, can I have another piece? Su Fangfei wanted more. She looked at Lu Li eagerly. The young master's eyes were wide open. The deer was so big, and half of it had already been eaten. If they didn't come over, there would only be bones left later. Ahem, Bai Gu coughed. Bai Qiuxue came to her senses and looked over. The young masters turned their heads away and pretended to enjoy the view. Bai Qiuxue smiled and looked at Lu Li. Lu Li, can you give them some? Looking at Bai Qiuxue, who was smiling like a crescent moon, Lu Li's heart softened. He nodded. Bai Qiuxue waved her hand and said, Young masters, come over and have a taste. Lu Li's cooking is the best. Really? I want to try. Bai Gu walked over with a smile. The other young masters couldn't be bothered to be reserved. They came over and quickly divided up the rest of the deer meat. So not bad, a young master said casually, even though his mouth was covered in grease. Chapter 176. After they were half full, Bai Gu and the others explored the valley again. After they were sure that there was no danger, they found a place to have a good sleep. The young ladies went to a small forest. They patted the ground with gauze and even surrounded it with gauze, making a simple tent. The young masters were quite simple. They found some weeds and big leaves to pad them and slept soundly. Lu Li went to the edge of the valley and cut down some big trees with his newly forged mighty heaven halberd. He took out some ropes from his interspatial ring and built a cabin in about an hour's time. The cabin was simple and crude. There was only one bed in it, but it was much better than where the others were sleeping. The reason Lu Li spent so much effort to build this cabin was not entirely for comfort, but for concealment. Inside the cabin, Lu Li took out the 2 treasures he got earlier. He didn't have the time or the mood to look at them. Now that he was completely safe, of course, he wanted to appreciate them. Yang Kai picked up the space ring and directly refined it, but the result disappointed him greatly. The interspatial ring was indeed an interspatial ring, but there was nothing inside. It was just an interspatial ring. But on second thoughts, Lu Li understood. Naturally, the treasures in the front would not be good. An interspatial ring was worth 10 million Xian crystals, which was not bad. Lu Li took out another scroll and flipped through it. He frowned after a few glances. The characters were not the current characters, but seal scripts. They were similar to the characters on the ancestral monument of the Cyan Phoenix race in the small world. Lu Li couldn't read them. I will ask Hunchback Tian to identify them later. Lu Li put the scroll away after a few glances. He sat for a while and fell asleep on his bed. Bang, bang, bang. Lu Li had just fallen asleep for a while when he felt someone kicking the cabin. He suddenly opened his eyes. The Xian energy in his body glowed as he looked outside. The cabin was not tall, and the door was low. Lu Li only saw a girl in a white dress with emerald flowers. He couldn't see her head. He sneaked out and saw a beautiful face. He asked without hesitation, Lady Shuang, why don't you go to sleep? What are you doing here? Do you want to sleep with me? Bah, it really was by Xiaoshuang. Of course, if it were by Qiuxue, she wouldn't have kicked the cabin so rudely. She spat on the ground with a blushed face. She stared at Lu Li and said, Lu Li, how dare you insult me? Do you believe that I will cut off your tongue? Lu Li was having a good sleep. He didn't have time to fool around with Bai Xiaoshuang. He waved his hand and said, Say it. I need to sleep. Bai Xiaoshuang snorted and said awkwardly, My sister said that the ground is uneven and there are ants. She can't sleep well. So, I want to borrow your cabin. Lu Li, you are a man. You can sleep outside. Your sister. Lu Li rolled his eyes. Bai Qiuxue would not make such an unreasonable request. Borrow, this was borrowing? Wasn't this daylight robbery? Lu Li didn't give Bai Xiaoshuang any face. He said, Tell Lady Qiuxue to come over. If she says she wants to borrow, I will lend it to you. I don't know you that well. With that said, Lu Li snuck into the cabin. Bai Xiaoshuang glared at him and ran into the woods with tears in her eyes. Lu Li didn't care. He was not a slave of the Bai family. Why should he let Bai Xiaoshuang have a cabin? It would be fine if she was nice. But Bai Xiaoshuang was begging him, and she was acting like she was giving him face. Lu Li didn't want to entertain her. What was more, Lu Li was sleepy himself. He didn't care if Bai Xiaoshuang died. He didn't care about anything else. He closed his eyes and fell asleep. He slept for 12 to 14 hours. When he opened his eyes, he felt refreshed. He walked out, stretched his back, and looked around. To his surprise, there were some young masters building cabins to his left. That being said, those young masters had never done something like this. They didn't know the trick. Also, they didn't have any ropes. They found some grass and vines and were trying to build the cabins. Bai Xiaoshuang was on the side with several young ladies. She was gesturing and yelling at the young masters. Seeing that Lu Li had woken up, she glared at him and then looked at the cabin that was about to be built with pride. She seemed to be telling Lu Li in a silent way that they could build the cabin without him. Lu Li threw them a few glances and smiled without saying anything. He turned around and called Little White. Then they walked towards the pond together. At the pond, Lu Li saw that nobody was around. He took off his clothes and jumped into the pond wearing only his underwear. Little White had already jumped into the water happily. It had been a long time since he took a bath. Lu Li felt uncomfortable. The water in the pond was running. There was a stream flowing in from the southeast, so he wasn't afraid that it would get dirty. After he took a bath, Lu Li jumped out of the pond and went to the woods to change into a clean robe. Then he walked out leisurely and made his way to the gathering place in the distance. Bai Qiuxue was there with Bai Gu and the others. Seeing Lu Li, Bai Qiuxue nodded to him with a smile. Bai Gu and the others greeted him as well. Lu Li walked over and asked, "Lady Qiuxue, when are we leaving?" Speaking of this, Bai Qiuxue frowned. Bai Gu and the other sighed as well. One of them explained, "I don't think we can leave anytime soon. We can't even break the inhibition formations on those doors. We haven't found any exits or traps yet." "The doors can't be opened? We can't find any exits or traps." Lu Li looked around and saw the steep walls and cliffs. He thought about it and asked, "Can't we stick our Xian artifacts in the cliffs and climb up to have a look?" Bai Qiuxue shook her head and said, "There are inhibition formations on the cliffs that cannot be broken. Lu Li, don't worry. There are so many small animals here, and so are the fish in the pond. It's enough for us to eat for more than half a year. There must be a way out of the valley. We could take our time to find it." Lu Li nodded. Dragon King wouldn't set a dead end. As long as they didn't starve to death, there were so many people here. They would find the exits sooner or later. Creak, creak, just as they were chatting, a door in the southeast suddenly opened, and figures shot out one after another. Lu Li and the others were on high alert. Bai Gu glanced over and relaxed. He said, "It's Zilian from the Heaven Martial Kingdom." Heaven Martial Kingdom? The ring on Lu Li's hand glowed. He took out the ghost mask at once and put it on. Then he said in a low voice, "Guys, I have enemies at the Heaven Martial Kingdom. From now on, don't call me Lu Li. Just call me Island Owner Lu." Bai Qiuxue looked into the distance and said carelessly, "Lu Li, we are here. What are you afraid of? If they want to mess around, they will have to ask for our permission." Bai Gu nodded and said, "There are only more than a dozen warriors of the Soul Pond realm at the Heaven Martial Kingdom. If they want to mess around, then let's fight them." Lu Li cupped his fists and thanked Bai Qiuxue and Bai Gu. Still, he didn't take off his mask. Safety first. It was always better to keep a low profile. After the group of people rushed out, the door was closed. When Zilian saw the warriors of the Thousand Island Lake, she was not surprised. Instead, she was happy. More than 20 people rushed over. "Sister," Bai Xiaoshuang and the others quickly gathered around Bai Qiuxue to avoid any conflict. Bai Qiuxue, on the other hand, stood there quietly. She looked calm, like the water in a pond. Soon, Zilian walked over with her warriors. Lu Li and the others looked at her and smiled at the same time. Zilian and the others must have suffered a lot in the maze. All of them looked exhausted. Their faces were sallow and they were emaciated. Their clothes and hair were messy. Many of them were yawning. Zilian was fine. She managed to pull herself together. She bowed to Bai Qiuxue and Bai Xiaoshuang and said, "Greetings, Sister Qiuxue, Sister Xiaoshuang. Greetings, young masters." Bai Qiuxue nodded slightly. She bowed back and said, "Greetings, Sister Lien. You must have suffered a lot, but you're lucky to be able to get out of the maze. Sister Lien, take your warriors and have a good rest." Zi Lien left with her warriors and went to the other side of the pond. After they left, Baigu put on a sarcastic smile and whispered to Lu Li's ear, "Two warriors of the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm. Apart from Zi Lien and Yu Lingxiu, there are only 12 warriors at the initial stage of the Soul Pond realm. They are no match for us in a fight." Chapter 177. After they were half full, Baigu and the others explored the valley again to make sure there was no danger. Then they found a place to have a good sleep. A group of young ladies went to a small forest, padded and surrounded the area with gauze, and made a simple big tent. The group of young masters was rather simple. They found some weeds and big leaves as cushions and slept soundly. Lu Li went to the edge of the valley and cut down some trees with his newly forged mighty heaven halberd. He took out some ropes from his interspatial ring and built a cabin in about an hour. The cabin was simple and crude. There was only one bed in it, but it was much better than where the others slept. Lu Li spent so much effort to build this cabin, not for comfort, but for concealment. Inside the cabin, he took out the 2 treasures he got earlier. He didn't have the time or the mood to look at them. Now that he was completely safe, he wanted to appreciate them. He picked up the interspatial ring and consumed it directly. He was disappointed. The interspatial ring was an interspatial ring, but there was nothing inside. It was just an interspatial ring. But on second thoughts, Lu Li understood. The treasures in the front would not be good. An interspatial ring was worth 10 million Xian crystals, which was not bad. Lu Li took out another scroll and browsed it. He frowned after a few glances. The characters were not the current ones, but seal scripts. They were similar to the ones on the ancestral monument of the Cyan Phoenix race in the small world. Lu Li couldn't read them. I will ask Hunchback Tian to identify them later. Lu Li put them away after a few glances. He sat for a while and fell asleep on the bed. Bang, bang, bang. Lu Li had just fallen asleep for a while when he felt the cabin was kicked. He suddenly opened his eyes. The Xian energy in his body glowed as he looked outside. The cabin was not tall, and the door was low. Lu Li only saw a girl in a white dress with green flowers. He couldn't see her head. He sneaked out and saw a beautiful face. He asked without hesitation, "Lady Shuang, why don't you go to sleep? What are you doing here? Do you want to sleep with me?" Bah, it was by Xia Shuang. Of course, if it were by Qiushua, she wouldn't have kicked the cabin so rudely. She spat with a blushed face. She stared at Lu Li and said, "Lu Li, how dare you blaspheme me? Do you think I won't cut off your tongue?" Lu Li was having a good sleep. He did not have time to fool around with her. He waved his hand and said, "Say it. I need to sleep." "Umph." Bai Xiaoshuang snorted and said awkwardly, "My elder sister says that the ground is uneven and there are ants. She doesn't sleep well, so she wants to borrow your wooden hut to sleep. Lu Li, you are a man. You can sleep outside." "Your sister?" Lu Li rolled his eyes. Bai Qiushue would never make such an unreasonable request. "Borrow? You call this borrowing? Isn't this daylight robbery?" Lu Li didn't spare Bai Xiaoshuang any face. He replied, "Ask Lady Qiushue to come over. If she says she wants to borrow it, I will lend it to you. I don't know you that well." With that said, Lu Li went back into the cabin. Bai Xiaoshuang glared at Lu Li and then ran into the woods with tears in her eyes. Lu Li didn't care. He was not a servant of the Bai family. Why should he let Bai Xiaoshuang have him? It would be better if she had a nice attitude. But Bai Xiaoshuang was begging him, and she was acting like she was giving him face. Lu Li did not want to entertain her. What was more, Lu Li was too sleepy to care about Bai Xiaoshuang. He didn't care about anything else. He closed his eyes and fell asleep. He slept for 12 to 14 hours. When he opened his eyes, he felt refreshed. He walked out, stretched his body, and looked around. To his left, he saw some young masters building cabins. That being said, those young masters had never done something like this. They didn't know the trick. Also, they didn't have any ropes. They found some grass and vines and were trying to build the cabins. Bai Xiaoshuang was on the side with some young ladies. She was pointing at the young masters and yelling at them. Seeing Luli up, she glared at him and then looked at the cabin that was about to be built with pride. She seemed to be telling Luli in a silent way that they could build the cabin without him. Luli threw them a few glances and smiled without saying anything. He turned around and called Little White. Then they walked toward the pond together. At the pond, Luli saw nobody else. He took off his clothes and dived into the pond in his underwear. Little White had already jumped into the water happily. It had been a long time since he took a bath. Luli felt uncomfortable. The pond was running water. There was a stream flowing in from the southeast, so he wasn't afraid of getting it dirty. After he took a bath, Luli jumped into the woods and changed into a clean robe. Then he walked out leisurely and walked toward the crowd in the distance. Bai Qiushue was there with Bai Gu and the others. Seeing Luli, Bai Qiushue nodded to him with a smile. Bai Gu and the others greeted him as well. Luli walked over and asked, "Lady Qiushue, when are we leaving?" Speaking of this, autumn snow furrowed her brows. Bai Gu and the rest also sighed lightly. One of them explained, "I'm afraid we won't be able to leave in a short period of time. None of us are able to break the restrictive spells on those doors. The doors can't be opened. We can't find any exits or traps." Luli looked around and saw the steep walls and cliffs. He thought about it and asked, "Can't we stick our Xian artifacts into the cliffs and climb up?" Bai Qiushue shook her head and said, "There are inhibition formations on the cliffs that cannot be broken. Luli, don't worry. There's so many small animals here, and so are the fish in the pond. They are enough for us to eat for more than half a year. There must be a way out of the valley. We can take our time to find it." Luli nodded. Dragon King wouldn't set a dead end. As long as they didn't starve to death, there were so many people here. Squeak, squeak. Just as they were chatting, a door in the southeast suddenly opened, and figures shot out one after another. Luli and the others were on high alert. Bai Gu looked over and relaxed. He said, "It is Zilian. She is from the Heaven Martial Kingdom." Heaven Martial Kingdom? The ring on Lu Li's hand glowed. He put on the ghost mask at once and said in a low voice, "Guys, I have enemies at the Heaven Martial Kingdom. From now on, don't call me Lu Li. Just call me Island Owner Lu." Bai Qiushue looked into the distance and said carelessly, "Lu Li, we are here. What are you afraid of? If they want to do anything, they will have to ask for our permission." Bai Gu nodded and said, "There are only more than a dozen warriors of the Soul Pond realm at the Heaven Martial Kingdom. If they want to mess around, then let's fight them." Luli cupped his fists and thanked Bai Qiushue and Bai Gu. Still, he didn't take off his mask. Safety first. It was always better to keep a low profile. After the group of people rushed out, the gate was closed. When Zilian saw the warriors of the Thousand Island Lake, she was not surprised. Instead, she was happy. More than 20 people rushed over. "Sister," Bai Xiaoshuang and the others quickly gathered around Bai Qiushue to avoid any conflict. Bai Qiushue stood there quietly. She looked calm, like the water in the pond. Zilian soon walked over with her warriors. Lu Li and the others looked at her and smiled at the same time. Zilian and the others must have suffered a lot in the maze. All of them looked exhausted, sallow, and emaciated. Their clothes and hair were messy. Many of them were yawning. Zilian was fine. She managed to pull herself together. She bowed to Bai Qiushue and Bai Xiaoshuang and said, "Greetings, Sister Qiushue, Sister Xiaoshuang. Greetings, young masters." Autumn Snow nodded her head lightly and returned the greeting. "Greetings, Sister Lian. It seems that you all have suffered quite a bit, but to be able to walk out of the maze is already a blessing. Sister Lian, why don't you take your people to have a good rest?" Zilian left with the others and went to the other side of the pond. After they left, Bai Gu put on a sarcastic smile and whispered to Lu Li's ear, two warriors of the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm. Apart from Zilian and Yu Lingxiu, there are only 12 warriors at the initial stage of the Soul Pond realm. They are no match for us in a fight. Chapter 178. The valley was quite large, with a radius of more than 2 miles. It was surrounded by mirror-like cliffs, and the sky was always bright. Clearly, there were inhibition formations. There were many animals in the valley. The pond was large, and there were many fish. If it were just Lu Li and the others, they could eat for more than half a year without worrying about starvation. But now that Zi Lian and the others were here, half of the food would have to be shared. If the other two teams came out as well, the food would be in short supply. Therefore, Bai Qiuxu ordered Bai Gu to take most of the team to look for traps and exits. Bai Qiuxue, together with several young ladies, assisted Lu Li in preparing the barbecued meat. At the same time, they prepared to store some barbecued meat in case of emergency. The interspatial ring could store food. The roasted meat could be kept for a month in there. It might not taste good, but it was better than starving to death. Lu Li caught 8 fawns and built 8 fires, ready to start work at the same time. Bai Qiuxue and several young ladies went with him to help. Bai Xiaoshuang was still tinkering with her cabin. Boom! From there came another loud noise. Lu Li burst into laughter. This was the 3rd time that Bai Xiaoshuang had made the cabin collapse, and she was still struggling. Building a cabin was not as simple as tying it up with ropes. It required some skills. Without the basic balance, the cabin would collapse as soon as someone touched it. Also, there were no grooves between the pieces of wood and no pegs in them. They were not a hole. How could a random cabin not collapse? Xiuling asked Shuang to come and apologize to island owner Lu. Without him, she would not be able to build the cabin for months. Bai Qiuxue found a young lady to ask Bai Xiaoshuang to come over. Then she turned back and said to Lu Li with a gentle smile, "Island owner Lu, my sister is not sensible enough. I am sorry." Now that Bai Qiuxue had spoken, Lu Li couldn't bear to watch. He nodded and said, "Later, I will help you build a cabin. It is not comfortable to sleep on the ground." Su Fangfei and the others' eyes glowed. They begged Lu Li to build one for them as well. It was shameful for a group of young ladies to camp in the wild. Also, there were ants and insects on the ground. Many of them could not sleep well. Okay. Lu Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He nodded and continued to remove the deer's hair and guts. After the 8 fawns were ready, Lu Li brought the group of people back to barbecue. 8 racks were set up on top of the fire, and 8 deer began to roast. The young ladies were all very excited, feeling that it was very fun. Bai Xiaoshuang came back, but she didn't apologize to Lu Li. She didn't even look at him. She pouted in anger. They are both twins, but why is there such a big difference? Lu Li shook his head secretly. He walked around the 8 bonfires, rubbing oil, salt, and spices on the 8 deer one by one. He had brought these things with him a long time ago. He had often gone up the mountain since he was young, so he naturally could not treat himself badly. Lu Li knew how to roast meat when he was 11 or 12 years old. He had asked Lu Yi to prepare the oil and salt, but he didn't expect it to come in handy. The aroma of barbecued meat quickly became stronger, and those who had gone to look for the exit returned one after another, all of them somewhat dejected. They found 2 exits. There were 2 doors that could be opened, but they were the exits that Zi Lian and the others used to exit the maze. Nobody wanted to go into the maze for the rest of their lives. They would rather die in the valley than go into the maze. The barbecued meat was about to be ready. Those people didn't leave. They gathered around and were ready to have a big meal. They were only half full from yesterday's meal. Today, they could finally have a big meal. The meat was getting cooked and the aroma was getting stronger. The team of the Heaven Martial Kingdom by the pond was in a mess. Zi Lian and the others copied Bai Qiuxue and surrounded a bath with cloth. After they cleaned up, they were about to eat some food and sleep. When they smelled the aroma, their stomachs were protesting. Only the young masters and young ladies of the super families came here from the Heaven Martial Kingdom, who knew how to roast meat. The valley was full of small animals, but nobody knew how to roast meat. They could only stare at it. Finally, someone couldn't stand it anymore. He instigated Zi Lian and Yu Lingshu to ask for some barbecued meat. Zi Lian couldn't swallow her pride, so she didn't say anything. Yu Lingshu, on the other hand, thought he was a young master of a 5th-rank family after all. The 2 young ladies of the Thousand Island Lake should show him some respect. Yu Lingshu took a bath and felt he was handsome. He walked towards Lu Li with 4 or 5 men. Seeing the several young ladies enjoying the barbecued meat, Yu Lingshu laughed from the distance. Ha! Huh. How are you? Lady Qiushue, Lady Xiaoshuang. How are you, young masters and young ladies? I am Yulingshu. I have admired you for a long time. I am here to pay my respects. Since there were guests, everyone stopped eating. Bai Qiushue and the other stood up and exchanged some pleasantries with Yulingshu. Some young masters secretly despised them. Clearly, these people were here to beg for food, but they pretended to be dignified and powerful like tigers. As expected, after some pleasantries, Yulingshu looked at the golden barbecued meat and said with a smile, "The meat is so delicious. I didn't expect that you would have such a talent in cooking. Lingshu admires you. Well, Lady Z was injured a few days ago. She is weak now. Can you give me some venison to help her recover? I will repay your kindness in the future." As soon as Lingshu finished his words, many young masters turned their faces away in disdain. He could eat whatever he wanted, but he used Zilian as a shield. How shameless Yulingshu was! Now that Yulingshu had asked for some, Bai Qiushue and the others couldn't say no. However, Bai Qiushue still looked at Lu Li. After all, the meat was roasted by Lu Li. Lu Li was wearing the ghost mask, so it was hard to tell whether he was happy or not. The moment Yulingshu came over, Lu Li had been disgusted to the extreme. He became even more disgusted when he heard Yulingshu's words. Seeing that Yulingshu was using Lady Z as a shield, Lu Li's eyes turned cold. He thought about it and suddenly cut a big piece of venison with a knife. He gave it to Ding Yang on a bamboo skewer and said, "Young Master Ding, now that Lady Z is unwell, we cannot just stand by and do nothing. Send it to Lady Z now. Let her have a good nourishment." The young masters of the Thousand Island Lake's eyes lit up. Ding Yang was grinning from ear to ear. He hurriedly walked toward the pond. Yulingshu and the others were dumbfounded. Ding Yang gave the venison directly to Zilian, and there was only so much. What was left for them? However, Yulingshu just said in person that Zilian was not feeling well. It was not appropriate for them to say more. They had to express their gratitude and leave. "What the hell?" Bai Xiaoshuang was outspoken. She couldn't hide anything. After Yulingshu left, she cursed in a low voice. Then she gave Lu Li a thumbs up with a smile and said, "Lu Li, you have guts. You are a man." This girl, Lu Li, rolled his eyes. Just now, she was angry with him and didn't even look at him. Now, all of a sudden, she praised him. This girl really had a clear distinction between love and hate. She was outspoken and outspoken. Lu Li said nothing. Bai Xiaoshuang frowned and said while eating, "Lu Li, what are you wearing the ghost mask for? Also, how can you eat with a mask on?" Lu Li looked at Bai Qiushue without saying anything. He took a portion of venison and went back to his cabin. Little White sat in the cabin. Lu Li threw at some fire jade spars, which Little White began to eat happily. Now that there were outsiders, Lu Li told Little White not to leave the cabin for fear that it might be captured or hurt. After he was full and ready to cultivate, there came a sound of footsteps outside. Then, a group of young ladies approached the cabin. One of them kicked on Lu Li's cabin and shouted, "Lu Li, come out and help us build a cabin. You promised my sister." Chapter 179. Bai Xiaoshuang was enraged as soon as Lu Li lost his temper. She stared at Lu Li. Lu Li had always been a man who could be persuaded by reason, but not cowed by force. If Bai Xiaoshuang wanted to take the blame, he would not build a cabin for her. The other young ladies had come over in high spirits. They were worried to see this. They had experienced Lu Li's temper. If he were to go on like this, they would have to sleep on the ground again. Lu Li was wearing the ghost mask. His eyes were cold, giving him a ferocious look. Bai Xiaoshuang looked at him for a while. Her eyes became misty. She lowered her head and said in a sobbing tone, "I just kicked her. Why are you so mean? You are a man. Do you only know how to bully girls?" Lu Li was at his wit's end when Bai Xiaoshuang cried. His eyes softened. He waved his hand and said, Okay, don't cry. I will build for you. But you have to help me. I cannot build so many cabins by myself." Bai Xiaoshuang smiled through her tears. She nodded and said, Okay, we will help you. You must build us some nice cabins." So many people had gone to search for the exit, but none of them had found it. It would be hard to find the exit in a short time. They had to take their time. Naturally, the young ladies wanted to eat and live well. It didn't matter if they could find treasures or not. They were out on a trip. The young ladies were eager to help, but the more they helped, the more complicated it became. Luli asked them to do the simplest things, and he began to work on his own. As the beautiful wooden huts were erected, the group of young ladies were extremely excited, and their faces were filled with bright smiles. They were looking for flowers and plants to decorate the cabins. Their bell-like laughter resounded in the wild. Bai Qiuxue was attracted over. She was grateful that Lu Li built her a cabin. She smiled at Lu Li without saying anything and continued to look for traps and exits. Bai Qiuxue left. Zilian came with 4 or 5 young ladies. She washed up and put on a green dress. She used a purple hairpin to tie up her hair. She held a white jade flute in her hand. She was so beautiful that only Bai Xiaoshuang could compare with her. Lu Li was still building the cabin with a mask on. Zilian and Bai Xiaoshuang exchanged some pleasantries. Then she walked to Lu Li, bowed, and said, "Thank you for the meat. I am here to express my gratitude." Lu Li looked back at Zilian. Looking at the beautiful lady in front of him, he remembered the scene when he met her at the frigid cloud mountain. He was in a trance and forgot to reply. Bai Xiaoshuang was unhappy to see that Lu Li was staring at Zilian. She cleared her throat and said, "Lu Li, why don't you say something?" Lu Li came back to his senses at once. He turned to Bai Xiaoshuang. He had told Bai Qiuxue not to call him by his real name, but she had forgotten. Lu Li. Zilian's eyes glowed. She took a closer look at Lu Li. Chapter 180. In 8 hours, Lu Li helped build more than 10 cabins. As for Zilian, he only helped build a small one and a big one so that the young ladies could stay together. He didn't have time to help them one by one. For the rest of the time, the two teams started to look for a way out. They almost turned the valley over several times without finding anything. Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue both went out in person. Apart from the 2 doors that led back to the maze, the other doors could not be opened no matter how hard they tried. They didn't find any traps or exits. The young masters and young ladies became restless and restless. Luckily, there was enough food. There was no conflict between the Thousand Island Lake and the Heaven Marshal Kingdom. Everyone was living in peace. Lu Li would grill meat twice a day and send some to Zilian every time. Yu Lingxiu and the others were gnashing their teeth in hatred. They also hunted some deer and wanted to grill them. However, just like the young masters of the Thousand Island Lake, they were grilled until the outside was black and the inside was raw. It was inedible. Lu Li even caught some fish and grilled it. The young masters and young ladies of the Thousand Island Lake were fed up with Lu Li. Even though some of them were still unhappy with Lu Li, they pretended to be polite. They were upset that they couldn't find an exit. There was no entertainment here either. Therefore, the moment they ate the meat, tasting the food became their only spiritual sustenance. Of course, there were 2 young masters of 4th-rank families who started to pursue Bai Xiaoshuang as spiritual sustenance. Some young masters even started to pursue the young ladies inside to relieve their boredom. However, nobody pursued Bai Qiuxue. Maybe it was because she was too smart, or maybe it was the coldness in her that kept people at a distance. All the young masters stopped at the sight of her. Of the twins, Bai Xiaoshuang was obviously more popular because she was not a schemer. In other words, she was gullible. All the young masters here knew very well that none of them deserved the twins. Bai Qiuxue had a 7th-rank bloodline, which made many people feel ashamed of themselves. Therefore, nobody dared to pursue Bai Qiuxue. They couldn't beat her in a fight. Lu Li had no interest in her. Before he could save Lu Ling and his parents, he dared not to fall in love. For one thing, he was afraid of dragging others down. For another, he was pressed for time. He had to concentrate on cultivation. How could he have time to flirt with girls? During this period of time, other than roasting meat, Qin Wentian had been cultivating. He had searched the valley once, but to no avail. Thus, he threw this problem to Autumn Snow and the others. With so many people, it was only a matter of time before they found the exit. Luli? Inevitably, Luli's real identity was known by Yulingshu. That day, Zilian brought some young ladies with her. Those young ladies lived in the cabin built by Luli. These days, Luli had been sending people to deliver deer meat. How could you not talk about it? He did not have a deep impression of Luli. It was just that the Battle of the Wuling County disgraced the Yu family. At that time, the Yu family was shocked. Even his grandpa came in person. Therefore, Yulingshu vaguely remembered the words Lu Li, Lu Ling, and the Lu family. Since he had doubts, he thought of a way. He chatted with a young lady of the Thousand Island Lake while he was looking for the exit and easily got some information. They learned that Luli escaped to the Thousand Island Lake from the Heaven Marshal Kingdom some time ago, and the family he attached himself to was the Lu family. It really is that bitch's younger brother. Yulingshu gnashed his teeth and growled. However, he did not act rashly. This time, all the families had made it clear that no one was allowed to kill anyone inside. Bai Lung was waiting outside the Thousand Island Lake. If anyone were to act recklessly inside and be caught red-handed, Bai Lung would definitely die given his temper. He couldn't do it openly. Yulingshu glanced coldly at Lu Li, who was grilling meat on the other side of the pond. Then he turned around and continued to look for the exit. 2 days later, a door was suddenly opened. A team rushed out. After they got out, many of them shouted in joy. The one at the front was Du Xiling with his amorous eyes. Warriors of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom had finally made it out of the maze. Yi Yuhan and the others are still not out yet. Zilian frowned and was a bit worried. Last time at the Ice Abyss, she and Yi Yuhan got along well. Now that Du Xiling had come out with his men, but Yi Yuhan was still nowhere to be seen, Zilian felt upset. She was even more worried when she thought about how they had been looking for so many days without finding the exit. 2 hours later, a door suddenly opened, and a group of people rushed out. Zilian was the first one to rush out. She was both happy and distressed to see Yi Yuhan in ragged clothes and curled up. Yi Yuhan held Zilian in her arms and cried. Then she passed out. Du Xiling's team had lost 3 people, while Yi Yuhan's team had lost 8. The ones that came out seemed to be mentally unstable. All of them were curled up. By Qiushue's side, the good situation was gone. They should have had a strong advantage since they came here in advance. It was a pity that they couldn't find the entrance. Otherwise, all the treasures of the Tomb of Dragon King would have been theirs by now. The most critical issue was that 4 teams were here. Food was in short supply. Maybe they would fight over food. Du Xiling and Yi Yuhan's teams had been trapped for so many days. There was hostility hidden in their bodies. A scuffle might break out. Bai Qiushue gathered everyone and told them to keep a low profile. They could not provoke other teams or start a war. Bai Qiushue's worry soon became a reality. After more than 10 hours, Du Xiling's team woke up from their sleep. Then they started to hunt the animals in the valley like crazy. They carried the animals back directly after they were killed and put them into Du Xiling's interspatial ring. This move angered the young masters of the Thousand Island Lake. 2 barbecued meat a day was the only enjoyment for the young masters and young ladies of the Thousand Island Lake. Now that the animals were all hunted down, what else could they eat? Bai Gu immediately went to negotiate with the young masters. Du Xiling's team, on the other hand, didn't care and kept on hunting. They ignored the young masters of the Thousand Island Lake as if they were talking nonsense. A conflict broke out. Du Xiling didn't do anything, but the 2 warriors at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom did. They wounded Bai Gu, Ding Yang, and the other 4 warriors. Eventually, Bai Qiushue and Bai Xiaoshuang arrived, and the conflict was stopped. Du Xiling came out and said something lukewarm. He casually apologized and scolded the warriors of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom. Then he brought his men back. Bai Qiushue suppressed the others. Bai Gu and the others were only wounded. Nobody was killed. Bai Qiushue didn't want the situation to escalate. Lu Li was awakened from his cultivation. He walked out, and asked about it. He learned what had happened. He regretted that he didn't ask people to prepare food earlier. Now, almost all the small animals were hunted down. Food was in short supply. Fishing. Luli soon made up his mind and said, "Send someone to fish. Prepare some food first." Bai Qiuxiue was a bit hesitant. If she sent someone to fish, it might cause 4 teams to fight for food. It would be troublesome if a big fight broke out. Fishing. Luli suddenly thought of something. He asked, "Right, have you sent someone to the bottom of the pond to check?" Bai Qiuxiue paused for a moment. Then she came to her senses. She shouted, "Ding Heng, go to the bottom of the pond right now. Maybe the exit is at the bottom of the pond. Don't worry." Chapter 181. They had searched the entire valley, but nobody thought of the bottom of the pond. Everyone had a fixed mindset. They all thought that the exit was in those doors, and they all wanted to find a mechanism to open those doors. Who would think of the bottom of the pond? The bottom of the pond was filled with mud. Many people found it when they were bathing. Also, the pond was not deep, so nobody thought of the bottom of the pond. The pond was running water. A stream of spring water came out from a corner of the valley and kept flowing into the pond. At this moment, Luli thought of something. There was water coming in, but no water going out. The water level of the pond had been maintained at this level, which meant that there must be an underground river at the bottom of the pond that was diverting the water away. Since there was an underground river and water could flow out of the valley, there must be a passageway out of the valley. Maybe it was the exit. As autumn snow gathered the crowd, Ding Heng led the 2 of them into the pool. Swaggering off his clothes, he took a bath, causing many of the young ladies in the distance to be infuriated. Looking for a chance, Ding Heng dived into the water quietly and started to explore the bottom of the pond. Unfortunately, there was a lot of mud at the bottom. Ding Heng couldn't find anything after 2 tries. The 3rd time Ding Heng dived into the bottom of the pond, he suddenly noticed that there seemed to be some movement in the water near a boulder. He dived to the edge of the pond and pushed the boulder. The boulder glowed, but didn't move a bit. There is an inhibition formation. The exit should be here. Ding Heng drew out the saber on his back and hacked at the boulder. The boulder exploded into dust, revealing a dark hole. Found it! Ding Heng was overjoyed. Without much hesitation, he rushed into the hole. It really was an underground river. Ding Heng dived into the hole and soon found a huge underground river. On the side of the underground river, there was a black gate glowing. Ding Heng pushed the gate hard. The gate was pushed open easily, revealing a dim passageway. Not a single drop of the river entered the passageway. Here it is. Ding Heng's eyes lit up like a wolf's. He crushed a jade talisman in his hand. Go! At the same time, a jade talisman in Bai Qiuxiue's hand was crushed. She was refreshed. She waved her hand and shouted. They had already packed up. The group of people shot into the pond like sharp swords. One by one, they rushed into the water. Whoosh, whoosh, the group of people rushed into the pool, and it was like huge rocks smashing into the water. It immediately alerted the other teams. Du Xiling, Zilian, and Yi Yuan hurriedly brought people out to watch. Exit. Du Xiling, Zilian, and the others immediately came to their senses and hurriedly urged the team to gather. It was a pity that there were a lot of young ladies in their group, and they dilly-dallied for quite a while and had yet to gather. Pass down my order. Come here immediately. Otherwise, we will leave them behind. Du Xiling was furious, and a trace of coldness flashed through his peach blossom eyes. As soon as he said that, the young ladies of the heaven-frigid kingdom didn't dare to dawdle and hurried over. Go! Du Xiling took the lead and rushed into the pool. The others followed closely behind and disappeared into the pool. Behind them was Zilian's team, and Yi Yuan's team was at the back. Whoosh, 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 autumn snow led a group of people and rushed into the passageway. The group of men all had a feast for their eyes. All the young ladies were soaking wet, and their dresses were thin and clinging tightly to their delicate bodies. That being said, as soon as the young ladies rushed in, they used their Xian energy to evaporate the water. Even though they looked a bit embarrassed, at least they wouldn't be exposed. Go! Bai Qiuxiue couldn't let the initiative go to waste. She walked to the front and ran like crazy. The passageway in front of them suddenly made a turn, and another door appeared. Again, this door could be pushed open easily. Inside was a dark cave. Nothing could be seen clearly. A long whip appeared in Bai Qiuxiue's hand. The purple moon on her neck glowed. She rushed into the door without any hesitation. Luli put on the ghost mask and followed at the back. After he rushed into the door, he felt a white glare flashing by. He actually felt dizzy. When he opened his eyes and looked around, he was dumbfounded. He was in a barren mountain, and he couldn't see any one of the Thousand-Island Lake. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating, but when he looked around, he found that he was indeed teleported to a barren mountain. Have I been teleported out? Luli couldn't figure it out. He pondered about it and started to walk around in strides to explore. When he got to the peak of a small mountain, he saw a white figure in the distance. The figure looked familiar. Luli ran towards it without thinking. The figure, however, hid behind a boulder. When Luli arrived, the figure appeared. It was Bai Qiuxiue. Lady Qiuxiue, where are the others? Have we been teleported out? Luli asked with confusion. Bai Qiuxiue looked up to the sky and said, "We are still in the tomb of Dragon King. The others should be in the mountains nearby." How is that possible? Luli was shocked. The tomb of Dragon King was a tomb. They were clearly outside. How could they still be in the tomb of Dragon King? Let's talk on the way. Bai Qiuxiue ran forward and explained to Luli, the tomb of Dragon King is not just a tomb. It should be a secret realm, refined by the Dragon King. This place is boundless. Secret realm. Luli was deep in thoughts. There were many small worlds in the spatial cracks of this world. Some small worlds were refined by powerful warriors, and they were called secret realms. So the tomb of Dragon King really was a secret realm. Otherwise, how could it be so big? The labyrinth was boundlessly vast. Look at the sky. There is no sun here, but it is still bright. Also, the Xianqi in heaven and earth here is richer than outside. This should be a secret realm. Bai Qiuxiue said again. Luli looked up to the sky and completely trusted Bai Qiuxiue's judgment. He asked no more questions and sped up. Since they were still in the tomb of Dragon King, then they must find the others of the Thousand-Island Lake first. Let's go that way. Bai Qiuxiue suddenly turned around after a few glances. Luli looked towards the direction she was pointing. He could vaguely see a towering mountain. He nodded. This mountain stood out like a crane among chickens. Maybe the warriors of the Thousand-Island Lake would also gather over there when they saw it. Lady Li. Luli saw a figure in the distance and shouted. A young lady was terrified. When she saw Luli and Bai Qiuxiue, she was overjoyed and ran towards them. Luli, look at the peak of the mountain. Bai Qiuxiue didn't look at Lady Li. She pointed to the peak of the mountain in the distance and shouted in surprise. Luli looked over and his eyes opened wide. Just now, he couldn't see it clearly because he was too far away. Now, he could faintly see it. He saw something floating on the peak of the mountain. On closer inspection, he found that it was a huge golden ancient coffin. The coffin was at least 30 feet long and more than 6 feet in height and width. It was tied up by 4 huge cold iron chains. If it were not for the huge cold iron chains, the golden coffin would have flown up to the sky. Coffin of Dragon King. Luli's eyes lit up like stars. Such a huge coffin, such a domineering scene, and such grandeur could only be the coffin used to bury the Dragon King. Since the remains of the Dragon King were at the peak of the mountain, then his endless wealth and treasures must be on the peak. Even a part of it would be enough to make a fortune, not to mention all of it. Let's go. Chapter 182. The peak pierced through the clouds and was at least 5,000 meters tall. There were no other tall peaks nearby, so this peak seemed to stand out from the rest. It was like a king standing among a group of kneeling subjects. They were getting closer and closer to the peak. The floating golden coffin was getting clearer and clearer. A surge of qi and energy came from the golden ancient coffin, which made Luli and Bai Qiuxiue more excited. A powerful warrior at the peak of the human sovereign realm, an emperor that once unified the northern desert. How powerful would the treasures he left behind be? Powerful Xian skills, peerless divine weapons and armors, rare, mystical materials. Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue sped up when they thought of all these. They observed the mountain as they ran. They found that there were many paths leading to the mountain. All of them were stone stairs built with blue stone, extending to the waist of the mountain in a straight line. There were at least 10,000 stone stairs. However, halfway up the mountain, there weren't so many paths. Dozens of stone steps turned into a winding mountain road, like a giant dragon spiraling upwards, winding its way to the peak of the mountain. Bai Qiuxue didn't stop for even one bit. She was at the front. When she reached the foot of the mountain, she stepped on the bluestone stairs. Right at that moment, the bluestone stairs glowed in white. Many spikes poked out from the bluestone, which scared Bai Qiuxue so much that she stepped back at once. So, it is not easy to get to the peak. Lu Li looked at Lady Li, who was pale in fright. There must be some inhibition formations on the bluestone stairs. One careless move could cost one's life. Li, you were... Wait at the foot of the mountain. This Lady Li was only at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm. She had almost zero battle experience. Bai Qiuxue looked at her pale face and ordered. Lady Li nodded. She didn't want to take the risk. Treasures were good, but she had to be alive to get them. Lu Li, are you up or not? Bai Qiuxue looked at Lu Li, who said with a light smile, Little White, come out and explore the way. Squeak, squeak, Little White flew out from Lu Li's sleeve. Its nose twitched, and then it ran directly to the bluestone stairs. Squeak, squeak, Little White flew up to the fifth stair and turned around to look at Lu Li with pride. Lu Li gave it a thumbs up and said to Bai Qiuxue, follow me. With that said, Lu Li kicked on the fifth stair directly. There was no reaction from that stair. It seemed that there was no inhibition formation on this stair. Xiao, Bai Qiuxue followed him closely. She looked at Little White with curiosity and asked, Lu Li, what kind of beast is this? You can actually discover the restriction? Lu Li smiled but said nothing. He said to Little White, keep exploring. Be careful. Squeak, squeak, Little White's eyes were filled with pride. It kicked with its short legs and climbed up another 4 steps. Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue quickly followed. Little White seemed to have a natural sense of restrictions. It jumped up 3 steps, then 4 or 5 steps, but it didn't trigger any restrictions. Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue climbed up the stairs easily. Boom! Suddenly, an explosion came from the left. The two of them looked in that direction and saw a stone staircase. A person had been struck by lightning, and black smoke rose from his body as he tumbled down. White Shadow! Autumn Snow recognized Bai Ying after a few glances. Seeing Bai Ying being supported by a young lady and being fed medicine, Autumn Snow felt slightly relieved. Li Yuer, go and take a look around. If you run into our people, tell them to be careful. Don't climb the stairs rashly. You can try them one by one and only go up when there is no inhibition formation. You can be slow, but don't take risks. Especially Shuang, tell her to be careful. Don't go up if you can't handle it. Bai Qiuxue had planned to wait for Bai Shuang and the others before going up. However, the treasure trove of the Dragon King was at the peak. She and Lu Li had taken the initiative. How could they wait here? What was more, Little White was Lu Li's, not Bai Qiuxue's. What if Lu Li went up by himself without waiting for her? Lu Li nodded. He appreciated Bai Qiuxue's decisiveness. He said nothing and rushed forward with Little White. Bai Qiuxue followed him closely. In the time for 1 incense stick to burn, they had climbed up more than 1,000 stairs. Boom! From the right came an explosion. The two of them looked back with worry. It was Du Xiling who was struck down by lightning. Sis, a delicate shout came out. It was Bai Shuang's voice. Lu Li asked Little White to stop. Bai Qiuxue looked to the left at once. Bai Shuang waved her hands excitedly and said, Sis, wait for me. I'm coming up now. Stop. Bai Qiuxue was frightened. She shouted, Shuang, there is a horrifying inhibition formation on the stairs. Don't come up this time. Wait for me at the foot of the mountain. A miserable cry came out from a path. They could faintly see a man rolling down in a bloody mess. By Xia Shuang and the others looked over and realized it was a warrior of the Heaven Martial Kingdom with a broken leg. They were so scared that their faces turned pale. Bai Qiushue's expressions became more solemn. She shouted to young Master Rong, who was running over from the distance. Bai Rong, keep an eye on Shuang. Don't let her come up. If you want to come up, be careful. Step by step. Don't be reckless. Bai Rong accepted the order. This time, Bai Xiaoshuang didn't dare to fool around. She stared at Lu Li and Bai Qiushue with excitement. At least her sister and Lu Li had climbed so many stairs. It seemed that the treasury of the Dragon King at the peak of the mountain would belong to Lu Li and her sister. How come they're so fast? Du Xiling and Zi Lian were confused. Yi Yuhan also brought several warriors to the path on the left. She tried several times, and several of them were injured. She heard the noise, so she brought people over. Du Rue, you go. Try one step at a time. A glint of ruthlessness flashed through Du Xiling's amorous eyes. He made up his mind and took out an armor from his ring. It was a full set, including boots and a helmet. It was of the heaven grade, and its defense was strong. He handed the armor to a warrior at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm next to him. The latter put it on and tried step by step to find a safe path. Clank, clank, clank. On the third stair, spikes came out from the ground. But Du Rue was wearing boots, so the spikes couldn't go in. Instead, he borrowed strength to run up. Remember, there's an inhibition formation on the first stair. Du Xiling ordered another warrior. That warrior took out a pen and paper from his chest pocket and started to write it down. You Fu, put on your armor and go. Yu Lingshu followed suit. He took out a powerful armor for defense. Before they entered the tomb of Dragon King, they were all prepared to wear powerful armors for fear of encountering situations like this. Yi Longyu, you go as well. Yi Yuhan was getting anxious. Lu Li and Bai Qiushue had climbed more than 1,000 stairs. If they didn't hurry up, by the time they reached the peak, there would be nothing left of them. Such a shame that such a talent was forced away by the Yu family. Zilian looked at Lu Li, who was running wildly behind Little White, and sighed. Little White would look back and squeak at Lu Li every now and then. Needless to say, this little beast belonged to Lu Li. Bai Qiushue was following behind. It must be Lu Li or Little White that they could climb up the bluestone stairs so easily. Also, Lu Li killed Patriarch Qing, who was at the later stage of the Spirit Sea realm at the Battle of the Wuling County. Lu Ling was of Fire Phoenix birth. Lu Li's cultivation speed was very fast. Everything proved that Lu Li was extraordinary. It was a pity that this talent was forced away from the Heaven Martial Kingdom. Judging from the attitude of Bai Xiaoshuang and Bai Qiushue, Lu Li would never go back to the Heaven Martial Kingdom. Chapter 183. The towering peak was as steep as the clouds. The cone-shaped peak had countless bluestone stairs leading up to the foot of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, there was a path to heaven winding up to the peak like a huge dragon. On the peak, a huge golden coffin was tied up by 4 thick, cold iron chains. The coffin didn't glow, but there was a light airflow and cyan clouds circling around it. It was extremely strange and mysterious. On many paths at the foot of the mountain, groups of people were trying their best to climb up the stone stairs. Every now and then, someone would trigger the inhibition formation, causing a tiny purple thunderbolt to fall from the sky. Sometimes there would be spikes and earth spears coming from the stone stairs. Sometimes there would be wind blades shooting out from both sides and flames spitting out. Many young ladies who wanted to climb up the stone stairs stopped at the sight. After several attempts, most of the ladies had given up. They were afraid. Treasures, wealth, and Shin skills were important, but they would rather not have the treasures if they were electrocuted and their hair burned. Only 3 of the stone stairs had people persisting. Du Xiling, Zilian, Yu Lingshu, and Yi Yuhan all took out powerful armors for defense. One of them went ahead to explore the way while the others followed. The inhibition formation was not too horrifying. Even without armors, they would only get hurt and fall down. After putting on armors with powerful defensive abilities, the spikes, wind blades, and flames could be ignored. Even the thunderbolts from the sky were a bit troublesome. The armors couldn't stand it either. Black smoke would come out from the electrocution, and the skin would be burnt. 3 or 4 people had been replaced in the 3 teams. The armors were not destroyed, and the injured ones could be replaced. Du Xiling, Yi Yuhan, Zhu Yin, and Yu Lingshu had absolute rallying power in the team. They could order people to go forward and clear the way for them. Lu Li's team had it the easiest. By the time the 3 teams climbed up several hundred stone stairs, Lu Li and Yi Yuhan had already climbed more than 6,000 stairs. There were nearly 10,000 stairs in total, and they were more than halfway up. The pathfinder in front of Yi Yuhan was struck by thunderbolts again. He fell down and was caught by the others in the team. Someone took off the armor, fed him some healing pellets, and asked him to rest on the spot. Another person put on the armor and continued to explore the way. There were more than 20 people in each of the 4 teams. Yi Yuhan and Du Xiling's teams lost some people in the maze, so there were more than a dozen of them. Excluding those young ladies who did not dare to come up, there were still 11 or 12 of them. The ordinary young masters in the various teams all had a clear understanding in their hearts. Their purpose for following up the mountain was to scout the way, to pave the way for the strongest 1 or 2 people in the team. It was impossible for them to climb to the top of the mountain. This was only the stairway to heaven. There was still a winding mountain road above. It was definitely not easier to climb than the bottom. Therefore, they had all decided to open a path for the strongest 1 or 2 people in the team. Once they obtained the treasure, even if they didn't share it with them, they would at least remember their kindness, right? The most powerful ones in each team were actually the ones with the noblest statuses, such as Du Xiling, Yi Yuhan, Yi Longyu, Zhu Yin, and Yu Lingshu. He was either a descendant of the royal family or a descendant of a 5th-rank clan. If he could help them, there would naturally be benefits in the future. Faster, seeing that Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue had climbed up more than 7,000 stone stairs, Du Xiling urged angrily. One of his subordinates, a young master, gritted his teeth and jumped up 5 stone stairs in one go. Surprisingly, he didn't trigger the prohibition spell. Du Xiling and the others quickly followed and jumped up. "Sis, come on." Bai Xiaoshuang was being watched by Bai Rong and the others. Even though she didn't have the chance to climb up, she was still excited and kept shouting. Bai Qiuxue was powerful. She was the most powerful one below the age of 20 at the Thousand Island Lake. She was even more powerful than Bai Gu and Bai Xiaoshuang. As long as she could get to the peak, all the treasures would be hers. Boom, boom, boom. More and more people were hit by the inhibition spells. As they climbed higher, there were fewer and fewer people in each team. When the 3 teams were halfway up the stairs, Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue had climbed all the stairs and were standing on the mountainside. "We are up." There was a buffer zone on the mountainside. It was a wide mountain path that circled around the mountainside. Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue stood on the mountainside. Looking at the fist-sized figures at the foot of the mountain, they looked at each other and smiled. "Let's go." Bai Qiuxue waved her hand. If they didn't cherish such a good chance, they would be ashamed to face the heavens. Lu Li asked Little White to explore the way in the front. They ran towards the entrance of the winding mountain path. There were no more inhibition spells on the mountain path. They easily reached the entrance of the winding mountain path. This path was also made up of stone stairs. Nobody could tell how many there were. Little White jumped up easily. It climbed up step by step without triggering any inhibition spells. No inhibition spells? Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue looked at each other in surprise. They stepped onto the first stone stair at the same time. As soon as they stepped onto the stair, they felt something weighing them down. Bai Qiuxue shouted in surprise, "Gravitational inhibition spell." Lu Li felt a huge stone was pressing down on his shoulder. He put on a solemn expression. The gravitational force on this winding mountain path must not increase. Otherwise, it will be hard for him to climb to the peak. Whatever he wanted. When Lu Li stepped onto the second stone stair, the gravitational force increased again. Bai Qiuxue caught up with him. She looked awful as well. She turned to Lu Li and said, Lu Li, this winding mountain path is not easy to climb. I think the gravitational force will be horrifying when we reach the peak. It was not Lu Li's style to enter a mountain of treasure and return empty-handed. He clenched his teeth and continued to climb up. He even sped up. He was weaker than Du Xiling and the others. He had to speed up so that they wouldn't catch up with him. Bai Qiuxue didn't say anything. She just kept up with Lu Li at a moderate speed. Little White was running happily in the front, as if it could not feel the gravitational force. It would look back at Lu Li after climbing up several stairs. Every now and then, it would bark to urge Lu Li to hurry up. Lu Li walked steadily. The gravitational force would increase a little bit with every step he climbed up. Even though it was not much, after dozens of stairs, Lu Li felt like he was carrying a huge stone weighing more than 1,000 pounds on his shoulders. This bit of gravitational force was nothing for Lu Li, not to mention Bai Qiuxue, who was at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm. They climbed up quickly and steadily. 100 stairs, 300, 800. The gravitational force had exceeded more than 11,000 pounds. Lu Li finally slowed down. If he was not careful enough, he would fall. He had to slow down. Bai Qiuxue was following him. She was still relaxed. There was no trace of sweat on her face. Lu Li, on the other hand, was sweating and strenuous. Lady Qiuxue, you go first. Don't worry about me. Lu Li looked back to Bai Qiuxue. She smiled gently and said, You didn't go on the stairs by yourself. How can I leave you behind now? I won't do something so immoral. Lu Li stopped persuading her and kept on climbing. When they reached the 1,500 stairs, the gravitational force had reached more than 13,000 pounds. Lu Li was getting slower and slower. Bai Qiuxue was still moving with ease, but there was some sweat on her forehead. Faster, faster, faster. From below came a roar. Lu Li looked towards the intersection of the winding mountain road. He saw Du Xiling leading two people running towards the winding mountain road. Lu Li thought about it and said, Lady Qiuxue, don't worry about me. Go all by yourself. It is better for you to get the treasure than for Du Xiling. Of course, the treasure is good, but if you ruin your mind because of the treasure, then the loss outweighs the gain. Bai Qiuxue was still smiling gently. She looked at the mountain elf and said, The Soul Pond realm cultivates the soul as well as the mind. Without a mind that is as steady as a rock and won't be moved by external things, how can I go up to the sky? Forgetting morality at the sight of profit and abandoning my teammates, that is not my mind. Chapter 184. Hello, young Master Lu. After Zilian caught up with him, she actually stopped. She wiped off the sweat on her face and forced a smile to greet Lu Li. Lu Li secretly felt grateful. Zilian must be afraid that Yulingshu would kill him, so she stopped on purpose to be friendly. Looking at Zilian's blushing face, Lu Li nodded gratefully and said, Hello, Lady Z. Hurry up. Many people have gone up. Zilian glanced at Yulingshu, who was behind her, nodded to Lu Li, and continued to stride upwards. She looked at Yulingshu. Her meaning was clear, warning him not to act recklessly. Yulingshu didn't act recklessly. He just stared at Lu Li ferociously and followed Zilian up in strides. It's okay, it's okay. Lu Li exhaled. Luckily, Zilian was here. Otherwise, Yulingshu would have made a move. Lu Li was alone. Yulingshu was at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm and a 6th-rank bloodline warrior. It would be too easy for him to be killed. Swish, swish, all of a sudden, a slight noise came out. Lu Li suddenly looked up and saw a tiny gust of wind coming at him. External release of Xian energy. Lu Li's eyes instantly became cold. Yulingshu had made a move, and it was a shameless sneak attack. The external release of Xian energy was too fast. Lu Li didn't even think about it. The ring on his hand glowed, and the mighty heaven halberd appeared in his hand. At the same time, he rolled down on the ground. Boom! The gust of wind hit the mighty heaven halberd. A surge of powerful force came through, and Lu Li was knocked away. His body tumbled down the stone stairs, and in an instant, he was smashed down dozens of steps. Damn it! Luli only managed to stabilize himself after he rolled down nearly 100 stairs. He climbed up with dirt all over his face. His eyes were filled with anger. If it were not for the fact that he reacted quickly, he would be dead by now. Luli secretly shouted, "You Lingshu, don't give me a chance, or I will kill you." Rustle, 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 several people happened to rush up at the same time. They smiled knowingly when they saw Li's embarrassing state. Luli got up and took a look. He was even more furious. Yi Yuhan and the others had all come up. He really was the last one. Yi Yuhan and the others didn't stop. They climbed up quickly. Luli rubbed his aching arms and followed them, clenching his teeth. 8,000, 9,000. Luli could barely crawl anymore. He sat down and rested for a while. Looking at the stairs that were about to reach the peak, he made up his mind to release his bloodline skill. At this moment, it would take him at most the time it took for an incense stick to burn to reach the peak. The god's bloodline skill could last for an hour, which was more than enough for him to reach the peak and find a chance to leave this place. The silver dragon mark on his back glowed. Li's muscles swelled and his eyes glowed in silver light. At this moment, he was wearing the ghost mask, revealing only a pair of silver eyes. He looked extremely strange, like a humanoid Xian beast. Go! Li immediately felt the weight on his shoulders lessen. He didn't walk straight, but climbed up quickly on his hands and feet. In an instant, he had rushed up 200 to 300 steps. 500, 800, 900, the force of gravity on his shoulders was so strong that Li found it hard to breathe. It was at least more than 100,000 pounds. Seeing that there were only 100 steps left, Li let out a beast-like roar and rushed up. Finally, Li stood on the peak of the mountain and the gravity disappeared. He sat down on the ground, gasping for air. After resting for a while, he cast his gaze towards the front, searching for the silhouettes of autumn snow and the others. The peak of the mountain was wide, but Li could not see anyone because of the thick white mist. All he could see were 4 cold iron chains piercing through the mist. There was a faint glow on the chains. The golden coffin in midair looked even more majestic from here. The coffin was surrounded by a silver glow, as if there was mercury flowing on it, making it even more strange and mysterious. There is a saber. Li's eyes suddenly glowed. He saw a saber stuck in the golden coffin, half of which was in the coffin. The saber was golden in color, emitting a strange chi and energy. The patterns and runes on it were glistening. One look, and Li could tell that it was no ordinary weapon. Can it be the peerless divine weapon used by Dragon King? Otherwise, how could it be stuck in the coffin? Li's heart skipped a beat. What was the rank of the peerless divine weapon used by a human sovereign realm warrior? The 9th rank of the heaven grade? Or above the heaven grade? Where are they? There are so many of them. Why is there no movement? Li looked back to the surroundings with a solemn expression on his face. 8 of them came up, but nobody was there. The peak of the mountain was only so big. It was impossible that there was no movement at all. Little White, Li called in a low voice. He looked around, worried. He hoped nothing bad would happen to Little White. Whoosh! A ray of white light came out from the mist directly toward Li. Who else could it be but Little White? Li was overjoyed. He stood up and hugged Little White. Squeak, squeak, Little White had a yellowed parchment in its mouth. It threw the parchment into Li's hands and squealed affectionately. Li was even more overjoyed. He laughed and said, "Little White, well done. The treasures on the peak must not be average. The parchment might be a profound Xian skill." Li put it into his interspatial ring without checking it. After making sure that Little White was not hurt, he asked in a low voice, "Little White, where are Bai Qiuxue and the others? How come they're not here?" Little White looked into the mist. Li frowned. Little White meant that they were in the mist. Then why didn't they make any noise? Little White, show me the way. Li thought that since Little White could go in and out of the mist freely, he must be fine as well. Little White jumped out of Li's arms and rushed into the mist. Li dared not to go too fast. He took out his mighty heaven halberd and walked into the mist step by step. The mist was so thick that visibility was less than 2 or 3 feet. Luli asked Little White to slow down and walk forward step by step. Woo, woo. After walking for more than 20 meters, Luli suddenly heard a low, strange sound. The noises were like ghost noises lingering in his ears, like the underworld sounds from hell. Luli stopped. He didn't dare to move forward. His instinct told him that he was in danger. A fatal warning came from the depth of his soul. Little White, come back! Luli shouted. Little White flew back from the distance. Luli's eyes flickered. He was hesitating whether he should move on or not. Right at that moment, a miserable scream came out. Luli's expressions changed. It was Bai Qiushue's voice. Judging from the scream, it seemed Bai Qiushue was suffering. More miserable screams came out intermittently. Luli's expressions kept changing. He was struggling with himself. In the end, he made up his mind and asked Little White to lead the way. Bai Qiushue once said on the winding mountain road that it was not her moral principle to abandon her teammates for the sake of profit. How could Luli stand by and do nothing? Woo-woo. The further he went, the louder the ghost noises were. Luli felt his eardrums were hurting and he felt dizzy. However, he could faintly see some people ahead of him. He had to press on. After another 4 or 5 feet, Luli finally saw clearly. He found Bai Qiushue and the others. He also saw Zilian, Yi Yuhan, Du Xiling, Yu Lingshu, and all the others. Retreat. Looking at the others, the first thing that came to his mind was to retreat. Everyone was entangled by some kind of tiny black vines. Apart from Bai Qiushue's miserable screams, the others had passed out. Their faces were pale. The situation was not good. Hiss, hiss. Luli's reaction was too slow. The tiny black vines scuttled out from underground like poisonous snakes and entangled his body. The ghost noises in his ears grew louder. Luli's eyes rolled up. He felt dizzy and passed out. P.S. Thank you very much. You have subscribed. Thank you very much. I will add another chapter. By the way, some readers said that they subscribed, but it didn't show up. Don't worry. I have contacted the technicians, and they will take care of it. Chapter 185. Squeak, squeak. Seeing that Luli had passed out, Little White paced around him anxiously. What was strange was that those tiny black vines didn't entangle Little White. The black vines kept coming out from the ground and wrapped around Luli. Just like Luli, the others were all entangled by the black vines like a dense spider web. The 7 of them were all in a coma. Only Bai Qiushue seemed to be in a half-conscious state. She was struggling and twisting in pain, but the black vines were too strong. No matter how hard she struggled, it was useless. Also, those small black vines were giving off a faint glow as if they were quietly sucking away the Xian, Qi, and vitality in their bodies. They looked worse and worse. Squeak, squeak, Little White circled around Luli for a bit. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and bit at the tiny black vines. Little White's teeth were so sharp that the black vines were bitten off at once. Little White hopped around on Luli's body. No matter how many black vines came out, they were bitten off by Little White. Luli held his head in his hands and let out a miserable scream. His eyes were red and his face was filled with terror, as if he had seen the most horrifying thing in the world. As a matter of fact, Luli did see many horrifying scenes. The ghost noises in his ears made him hallucinate. In a daze, he felt he was in hell. Ghosts were coming at him from all directions, and there were many creatures of the underworld with green faces and fangs try to tear him into pieces. Luli held his head and rolled around on the ground. Countless tiny black vines came out to entangle him. Little Black followed Luli and tore all the black vines that came out. Buzzing. Right at that moment, the animal tooth pendant on Luli's neck suddenly glowed like fireflies in the night sky. Strands of strange energy entered Luli's body and eventually converged into his soul. After the strange energy entered, Luli felt the pain in his soul was alleviated. Those ghosts and the creatures of the underworld with green faces and fangs were gradually disappearing. His mind was clearing up a little bit, but he still felt dizzy as if his head was going to explode. He could not move at all. The animal tooth pendant was glowing. Luli's mind was getting clearer and clearer. The pain in his head was getting less and less. He exhaled slightly, squinted his eyes, and observed the surroundings. Squeak, squeak, little White was still by his side, biting the black vines. Every black vine that came out would be bitten off by little White. Luli was completely relieved. Turning his gaze towards Autumn Snow and the others, he saw Autumn Snow twisting her body in agony. Her eyes were half open, and it was clear that she was in the same state as him, half awake and half awake. SS. Luli wanted to stand up and say by Chioshua, but he didn't move after hearing the sound. Du Xiling woke up. His eyes shone with a red light. He grimaced in pain, stood up, and struggled to break free from the black vines. Buzz! A triangular mark on his neck lit up. Then, the small mark flew out and collided with the black vines that bound his body. In an instant, the black vines were all cut apart. Whoosh! After breaking free from the black vines, Du Xiling jumped up and grabbed the huge cold iron chain. His eyes were red, and he grimaced in pain as he quickly climbed up the chain. "You want to take the knife up there?" Luli looked up along the huge cold iron chain and saw the knife on top of the golden coffin. He took a closer look. Suddenly, his eyes glowed. He saw an interspatial ring on the handle of the knife. The ring was tied to the handle with a small rope. He wouldn't notice it unless he looked carefully. The hidden treasures of the Dragon King. There must be endless treasures in the interspatial ring. Luli's eyes were filled with passion. He thought about it and said to Little White in a low voice, "Little White, don't worry about me. Climb up the chain and get the interspatial ring off the knife for me. Now." Du Xiling was already climbing up. He was very fast. Luli didn't dare to fight with him. Du Xiling was powerful. If Luli moved, he would be attacked by Du Xiling. Luli had to rely on Little White to climb up from another iron chain. Little White was very obedient. It turned into a streak of white light and rushed out. It climbed up the other cold iron chain. Du Xiling's red eyes found Little White at once. His hands glowed, and he was about to attack. However, at that moment, a raging fire suddenly burst out from below, which attracted his attention. "It is Yu Lingxiu." Luli sensed it. He looked sideways and saw a blue flame mark on Yu Lingxiu's neck glowing. His entire body was on fire. Those black vines were burned up at once. Du Xiling, the hidden treasures of the Dragon King are mine. Yu Lingxiu's eyes also glowed with a red light. His expression was ferocious. He suddenly released a strand of Xian energy. The flame mark on his neck glowed as well. Balls of dark red flames blended into the Xian energy he released and shot towards Du Xiling like a fire snake. "Yu Lingxiu, how dare you!" Du Xiling roared in rage. At this moment, he had climbed up half of the iron chain. He was in midair, but his soul was still being attacked by the ghost noise. His reaction speed was greatly reduced. How could he withstand Yu Lingxiu's attack? Swish! He had no choice but to jump down from the huge cold iron chain. At the same time, the small mark on his neck turned into a streak of light and shot towards Yu Lingxiu. Yu Lingxiu moved. A ball of flame flew out from his neck and burned off the black vines on a young master of the Heaven Frigid Kingdom. His robe was on fire as well. He carried the unconscious young master with one hand and used him as a shield. "Yu Lingxiu, you are so despicable." Du Xiling's amorous eyes were filled with anger. He had to control the small mark to fly back. Yu Lingxiu suddenly threw the warrior who was on fire to Du Xiling. At the same time, he controlled a fire snake to fly towards Du Xiling along the ground. Du Xiling's soul was still being attacked by the ghost noise. The pain in his head was unbearable. His attention was attracted by the young master on fire from the Heaven Frigid Kingdom that Yu Lingxiu threw at him. He didn't notice the fire snake on the ground at all. When he realized what was going on, the fire snake had scuttled up from the ground and entangled one of his legs. Du Xiling screamed miserably. He rolled on the ground. He grabbed that young master of the heaven-frigid kingdom and ran away. His furious voice rang out, "You Lingshu, wait and see. I will settle the score with you sooner or later. Take the other one back as well." Yu Lingshu sneered. He casually shot out a ball of flame. The other young master of the heaven-frigid kingdom was also set on fire. The black vines were burned off. Yu Lingshu kicked him. That young master dashed to where Du Xiling left like a fireball. Yu Lingshu, wait and see. Du Xiling was injured. The other two warriors of the heaven-frigid kingdom were burned. The three of them were no match for Yu Lingshu. Du Xiling had to leave in a rage. Treasures were precious, but life was more precious. As a prince of the heaven-frigid kingdom, he had no lack of treasures. Ha ha ha. Yu Lingshu laughed. He stared at the saber and interspatial ring on the huge golden coffin above his head. The others were all tied up by the black vines and in a coma. The hidden treasures of the Dragon King were all his now. Whoosh whoosh. A slight sound pierced through the air. Yu Lingshu's red eyes turned cold at once. He looked to the left and happened to see a purple moon dancing in the sky, cutting off the black vines one by one. Bai Qiuxue released her bloodline skill against the pain in her soul. Yu Lingshu's eyes flickered. In the end, there was a trace of cruelty in his eyes. He lifted his hand and shot a fire snake at Bai Qiuxue. Chapter 186. No, Bai Qiushue's other leg was entangled. She was not in a good state of mind. If she was entangled by the fire snake, she would be burnt to a crisp. Even if she could survive, she would be seriously injured. Lu Li said to himself that this was not good. He came to his senses in an instant. Little White was not here. He was entangled by the black vines, so he could not go over to help. He had to throw the halberd in his hand. Bang! His throw was accurate. The halberd arrived in front of Bai Qiuxue first. The fire snake hit the halberd and saved Bai Qiuxue. Yu Lingshu's ferocious face turned cold. He glanced over to Lu Li with his red eyes. Seeing Lu Li, he flew into a rage. A ball of flame flew out from his neck and smashed towards Lu Li. He wanted to kill Lu Li on the winding mountain road. Now, Lu Li dared to make trouble. How could he not be angry? Lu Li was entangled by the black vines, so he could not move at all. He could only watch the ball of flame flying towards him. His body was on fire. His skin was burnt. He cried out in pain. The black vines were burnt off. He rolled on the ground. Even though the flame was put out, most of his skin was burnt. He was in so much pain that he was twitching. He was so badly injured that he could not move his hands and feet. Whoosh! A ray of white light came. Bai Qiuxue got rid of the black vines and rushed over. She took out a healing pellet and stuffed it into Lu Li's mouth at once. Then she looked at Yu Lingshu angrily and said, "Yu Lingshu, how can you be so cruel?" Yu Lingshu sneered and said, "Everyone wants to get the hidden treasures of the Dragon King. Rather than being hurt by you, I would rather make the first move. As long as I don't kill you, I don't think even Bai Long will say anything." While he was talking, Yu Lingshu strode over and kicked a young warrior next to Yuhan. This warrior had just shown signs of waking up, but he passed out again after being kicked. Yu Lingshu walked towards Lu Li and Bai Qiuxue step by step. His body was enveloped by the flame. The black vines could not get close. His flame was strange, but it did no harm to him. He looked over and said coldly, "Lady Qiuxue, did you pass out on your own? Or should I give you a hand? If you don't faint, how can I go up and seize the treasure with peace of mind?" Bai Qiuxue looked at Lu Li to make sure that his life was not in danger. She stood up and coldly said, "You want to knock me out? Let's see if you have the ability." Isn't that simple? The ring on Yu Lingshu's hand glowed, and a huge iron stick appeared. Balls of flames appeared on his neck, condensing into 3 fire snakes and shooting over. Bai Qiushue's expressions changed as soon as she saw this. The snakes of fire were not attacking her, but Lu Li. Yu Lingshu's intention was clear. He wanted to kill Lu Li. If Bai Qiuxue didn't save him, Lu Li would die for sure. If she tried to save him, He could easily attack Autumn Snow and knock her unconscious. Lu Li had just saved her life. How could Bai Qiuxiue watch Lu Li being burned to death? She had to take out a shield and put it around Lu Li. At the same time, she controlled Ziyu to attack Yu Lingxiu. Bang! Yu Lingxiu shot out a ball of flame, smashing that crescent moon away. The three fire snakes heavily smashed into the silver shield in front of Autumn Snow. The silver shield was burned by the high temperature and slowly melted into molten iron. Bai Qiuxiue's hand was burned. She had to throw away the shield, hold Lu Li, and try to retreat quickly. How could Yu Lingxiu let Bai Qiuxiue go so easily? He rushed over like a beast and smashed his huge iron stick at Bai Qiuxiue's head. Swish! Even though Bai Qiuxiue's head was still in pain, she reacted fast. She kicked with one leg and dodged to the side. Lu Li, go to hell! Yu Lingxiu shouted in anger. He swung his iron stick horizontally and smashed it at Lu Li's head. Bai Qiuxiue showed a trace of helplessness in her eyes. The tingling sensation in her soul affected her greatly. Her reaction speed was reduced, and her fighting ability was weakened. She had only two choices at the moment. She could either watch Lu Li being smashed to death, or she could help Lu Li block this strike. She chose the latter. She turned around, turned Lu Li's head away, and used her back to block the strike of the iron stick. Bang! This was exactly what Yu Lingxiu wanted. He wanted to hurt Bai Qiuxiue so that he could get the treasure. Lu Li's iron rod moved up a bit and smashed on the back of Bai Qiuxiue's head. Bai Qiuxiue groaned in pain. The back of her head was dripping with blood. She held Lu Li in her arms and fell to the ground. I am doomed. Lu Li was in so much pain that he was exhaling cold air. He was in so much pain that he gasped. Bai Qiuxiue fell on top of him, motionless. Clearly, she had passed out. He groaned in his mind. He was afraid that he was going to die here today. Yu Lingxiu would not let him go. Rustle, rustle, rustle. As expected, Yu Lingxiu walked over in strides. Lu Li clenched his teeth and was ready to risk his life. However, the mighty Heaven Halberd was not with him. Yu Lingxiu was at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm and had 6th rank bloodline. What could he use to fight? Right at that moment, there came a groan of pain from not far away. Yi Yuhan happened to wake up. Yu Lingxiu threw a look to that direction and snorted. He ignored Lu Li and walked to Yi Yuhan in strides. He swung his iron stick and smashed at the back of Yi Yuhan's head. Yi Yuhan only managed to say one word before she passed out again. Yu Lingxiu threw a look to Zilian. He was worried that this young lady would wake up as well. He dared not to waste any more time. He jumped up, grabbed the huge cold iron chain, and climbed up. Whoosh! What Yu Lingxiu didn't see was that on the other side of the cold iron chain, a small beast flew down. Little White came back with an interspatial ring in its mouth. Squeak, squeak, Little White rushed to Lu Li's side. Seeing that more than half of Lu Li's body was burnt, Little White cried out in concern. Lu Li opened his eyes with difficulty. Seeing that Little White came back with a ring in its mouth, he was intrigued. Even though Yu Lingxiu had gone up, the interspatial ring was already taken by Little White. There was only a saber left on it. Lu Li moved his arm with difficulty and put the interspatial ring away before he looked to Yu Lingxiu. He saw that Yu Lingxiu was very fast. Soon he had climbed up. At the moment, he was standing on top of the golden coffin. He strode towards the huge saber. Divine weapon of Dragon King. The saber was glowing with a divine light. Talisman characters were glaring. Clearly, it was not an average weapon. Lu Li had seen heaven-grade Xian artifact before. This divine weapon might be above the heaven grade. What was more, this golden coffin might be the dragon coffin where the Dragon King was buried. How could this divine weapon be an average one when it could be cracked open so easily? Yu Lingxiu was very excited. His judgment was much better than Lu Li's. He was very clear about the value of this divine weapon. It could be a legendary holy grade Xian artifact. He walked on top of the golden coffin in strides. His red eyes were glowing. His heart was beating faster and faster. He walked over step by step until he reached the edge of the divine weapon. He slowly grabbed the handle of the divine weapon with one hand. At that moment, Yu Lingxiu almost stopped breathing. Buzzing. The moment Yu Lingxiu grabbed the divine weapon, it glowed brightly. Then a surge of extremely horrifying chi and energy spread out from the divine weapon, covering the entire peak. Under the influence of this chi and energy, all the unconscious people on the ground opened their eyes at the same time. Even Bai Qiuxue, who had passed out due to severe injuries, opened her eyes. No, Luli suddenly had a very bad feeling. The moment Yu Lingshu grabbed the divine weapon, a surge of evil and cold chi and energy came out from Yu Lingshu's body. Chapter 187. Not only Lu Li, but everyone else had the same feeling. The man up there was no longer Yu Lingshu, but a demon possessed by a demon. The glow of the divine weapon was getting brighter and brighter. A stream of cyan air flowed out from the divine weapon and surged into Yu Lingshu's body. Yu Lingshu's eyes turned completely blood red. Evil spirits surged in his body. He looked up to the sky and howled. His howl was filled with excitement and ferocity. That howl didn't sound like that of a human, but of a ferocious beast. No, stop him, or we will all die here. Bai Qiuxue felt something was wrong. Even though the back of her head was still bleeding, she couldn't worry about anything else. She shouted anxiously. Zilian and Yi Yuhan naturally felt that something was wrong. The two of them looked at each other. The little beast mark on Yi Yuhan's neck flashed, and a black little beast shadow flew out, turning into a black demon wolf-like profound beast shadow. The shadow's claw swept over the black vines and tore them apart. Yi Yuhan stood up. She controlled the demon wolf shadow to fly around and cut off the black vines on Zilian and Yi Longyu easily. Little White had already bitten off the black vines. Bai Qiuxue stood up with her teeth clenched. Luli couldn't stand up even if he wanted to. Even though Bai Qiuxue had given him top-level healing pellets and the animal tooth pendant had been increasing the efficacy, he couldn't recover in a short time. Go! Yi Yuhan made her move at once. She controlled the demon wolf shadow to fly up to the sky directly at Yu Lingshu. Zilian frowned, but didn't say anything to stop her. She knew clearly that Yu Lingshu must have been controlled by some kind of demon. If she didn't injure or kill him, everyone would die. The demon wolf shadow flew up, but Yu Lingshu showed disdain on his face. Streaks of black air suddenly surged out from his body and condensed into a shadow of a ferocious ghost. It dashed towards the demon wolf shadow with pride and no fear. It swallowed the demon wolf shadow at once. Poof! Yi Yuhan spat out some blood. She fell to the ground and passed out again. The demon wolf shadow shrank by several times and flew back. It formed a beast mark on Yi Yuhan's neck, but it was dim. Clearly, it was no match for the ferocious ghost. Crack, 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 Yu Lingshu exerted some strength in his arm. The divine weapon was slowly pulled out from the golden coffin bit by bit. With every inch the divine weapon was pulled out, the killing intent on the divine weapon grew stronger, making it hard for people on the ground to breathe. Yi Longyu leaped up and grabbed the huge cold iron chain, quickly climbing up the ancient coffin. However, before he had the time to climb onto the coffin, Yu Lingshu suddenly waved his hand. The black air stream around him once again condensed into a ghost's face, which smashed onto Yi Longyu. Bang! Yi Longyu spat out blood and flew backward. He couldn't even stand one move from a warrior at the middle stage of the Soul Pond realm. He was badly wounded and passed out immediately. The flower mark on Zi Lian's neck glowed. It turned into colorful petals and flew toward Yu Lingshu. Yu Lingshu snorted. He also condensed a ghostly face with his evil spirit and enveloped those petals. The originally colorful petals immediately dimmed, and Zi Lian's complexion became exceptionally pale. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body shook violently. Her delicate body softly fell to the ground and was once again entangled by the black vines. It's over. Bai Qiuxue looked at the peerless divine weapon being pulled out gradually, and at Yu Lingshu, who was filled with ferocious intent. She felt powerless. The evil spirit was so heavy that she couldn't even move her feet. She couldn't run away even if she wanted to. Yu Lingshu's power was not strong. If it were a one-on-one fight, Bai Qiuxiue was confident that she could defeat him. But Yu Lingshu made her feel like he was a demon. Not even a warrior of the Fate Wheel realm could defeat him, let alone him. Crack, crack, crack. The divine weapon was still being pulled out slowly. Once it was all pulled out, it would be the end of the world for everyone. Lu Li was well aware of the situation, but he was badly injured as well. Even if he were in his best condition, he wouldn't be able to stop Yu Lingshu, let alone being seriously injured. Something is not right. Lu Li looked at Little White that was gnawing on the black vines. He looked at the 4 huge cold iron chains and shouted, "Little White, go and bite off all the huge cold iron chains." Little White didn't have any hesitation in obeying Lu Li's order. It flew over in a white blur, opened its mouth, and bit one of the huge cold iron chains. What happened next shocked Bai Qiuxiue. More than half of the huge cold iron chains holding the golden ancient coffin was bitten off by Little White. Since Dragon King was using huge chains to hold the golden ancient coffin, needless to say, the materials of the chains must be special. At least, average Earth Gratian artifact would not be able to cut them off. But Little White could bite them off easily. Okay. Bai Qiuxiu understood what Lu Li meant. The golden ancient coffin was floating in midair. If it weren't for the huge cold iron chains, it would have flown away by now. As long as the 4 huge chains were bitten off, the golden ancient coffin would fly away for sure. Either Yu Lingshu would have no chance to pull out the divine weapon, or he would have to fly away with the coffin. Either way, everyone would be much safer. Yu Lingshu noticed this. He snorted angrily. He condensed black air currents and formed a ghost face. At the same time, he held the divine weapon in his other hand, trying to speed up the process of pulling it out. "Little White, move," Lu Li shouted. However, his shout hurt his wound. He groaned in pain. Little White's body turned into a streak of white light and shot forward. It rushed to another cold iron chain and continued to chew on it. Courting death, Yu Lingshu was enraged. He said in a hoarse voice, but it sounded old, not like his original voice at all. He grabbed the divine weapon with one hand and condensed black air currents with the other to form ghost faces. However, Little White was fast and small. Before it could attack, it had jumped to another huge cold iron chain. Yu Lingshu could not hit it. Bang, a huge chain was bitten off. The golden coffin on top of it was shaking violently. Yu Lingshu had to hold on to the divine weapon with both hands. Otherwise, he would be thrown off. "Little White, hurry up," Lu Li shouted in a deep voice. Little White rushed over. In the time for a few breaths, Little White had bitten off another huge cold iron chain. This time, the golden ancient coffin was shaking even more violently. Yu Lingshu almost fell off for several times. His glowing red eyes were filled with rage. Black air constantly condensed in his hands. One ghost face after another was formed. Unfortunately, Little White's reaction was fast. Yu Lingshu couldn't hit it. Bang! Another huge cold iron chain was broken. The golden ancient coffin really flew up and stood upright. Yu Lingshu grabbed the divine weapon with one hand. He was floating in midair. Swish! Little White dashed towards the last huge cold iron chain again. A hoarse voice came from Yu Lingshu's throat. "Stop. Otherwise, the coffin of the Dragon King will fly away and you will not get the treasures inside. What you have are all low-level treasures. The real good stuff is in the coffin. If you listen to me, I can give you all the treasures." That voice was old and hoarse. It was not Yu Lingshu's voice. Bai Qiuxiue was hesitating. She looked to Lu Li. Lu Li turned a deaf ear. Clearly, it was not Yu Lingshu who was talking. To negotiate with such a devil was like dancing on the tip of a knife. Only death awaited them. Little White didn't receive Lu Li's order. It continued to chew. The huge cold iron chain was bitten off at once. The golden ancient coffin glowed. The entire peak of the mountain trembled. The golden ancient coffin whizzed up and flew up to the sky. "Damn it, you have ruined my plan. Go to hell, all of you. Devil slave, kill them." Yu Lingshu, who was hanging on the divine weapon, shouted in rage. A green light glowed from his body and rushed into the divine weapon through his arm. Then Yu Lingshu let go of the divine weapon. He fell to the ground. Die, die, die. Yu Lingshu crawled up and shouted to the sky. This time, his voice was no longer old. It was Yu Lingshu's voice. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.